Anyway, you know something?
Yeah.
Whatever we do about this, we better do it fast. You know why?
Yeah.
Because beaches are going to be gone soon.
They are going to be gone.
They're going to be gone soon.
There may be more, actually.
You've been to the Cape Cod National Seashore lately?
I have, actually,
It's
every
like
summer.
disappearing. It's really kind of sad. The town beach down at Westport is disappearing. It's really sad what's happening to these beaches.
And by the way, we're patsies for allowing this to be done to us with the legislature not helping us. So we want to know, one, do you support these kinds of changes? And two, until the changes happen, which will probably be never based on this legislature's track record, what do you do to get beach access? What is your trick? I mean, as we discussed with Katie, again, trustees reservation, like a Wingershik or wherever it is, you can get a ticket, a parking ticket with a time thing in advance. That's a step in the right direction. But essentially, one more time, 12% of the coastline is accessible to the public. Do you not find that outrageous?
Yeah, no, you have to get there. I mean, the beach is closest to me down the Cape. You got to get there by 9 o'clock in the morning if it's a hot day and there's no place to park. You can ride your bike, you can, but if you want to park, you got to get there.
But that's even if there is public access. 88% is not accessible, even if you get there 3 days before you want to get in.
And you know what's really, I think, going a little too far?
What's that?
To chase people that are on your beach with golf clubs, which apparently happens a lot.
I know they do
People
that.
are chased with shovels, hit with golf clubs, and berated by just touching a little piece of private beach. And you know, this is funny too, because I think a lot of people who don't live on the ocean, which is...
Oh, bless you. Marjorie sneezed.
Nearly all of us. Nearly all of us.
Oh, she's about to sneeze again. This is a real problem.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Two is the limit under our contract.
Walk. I mean, I don't know. I guess the people that sit down, that's when they get in trouble, because all of us have walked up and down the beach.
Yeah.
I've never had any hassle walking up and down the beach.
Well, you know why? Because you've done a lot of fouling, from what I understand, which allows you. So keep this in mind. Under our state law, unless you're fouling, navigating, I assume that means like rowing your canoe or something, fouling, navigating, what's the third thing, or fishing, you can't even use the damn beach. I mean, it is totally ridiculous.
Do you know what fishing is?
Yeah, I know. You got to fish.
Okay, just
what's that thing in the Bible about the fish thing? What's the fish thing?
Oh, you feed a fish, and you feed them for the day. You teach them how to fish. You feed them forever.
You eat a
Something
fish
like
or kill a bird.
Something
right,
like
exactly.
That. Okay, 877-301-8970. No, it's going to be really hot next week. And you know what's kind of sad? A lot of the beaches around here are public access, but they can often be polluted. You always have to check.
No, they are not. They are not.
Yeah,
12% are public.
I know.
12%.
But beaches around here, I'm talking about Revere Beach is not that far, but they have pollution problems up there. The beaches over in South Boston, which used to be totally polluted, they cleaned up Boston Harbor. That was a great thing we did. I don't know, was that 20 years ago or 30 years ago or something? But sometimes it can still be a little dicey about swimming over there. But that is a big beach.
Do you think the legislature is going to address these issues in the next couple of weeks?
No, I do not.
Okay, fine. 877-301-8970.
You know why? Didn't we just get the award for the slowest moving legislature in the country yet again?
We do nothing ever about anything.
We do nothing ever about anything.
Okay.
I tell you, and taxpayers are paying the salaries of the people that do nothing ever about anything.
Here's an anonymous texter. I call foul, F-O-U-L, on Jim's water fouling, BS. Let me shoot my bird wherever I want. Thank you very much. And Woody, the UPS driver, is a frequent texter. How do I take advantage of Massachusetts parks and beaches? By going to Maine. I mean, really, you know, we're going to make fun of this. This is a real serious quality of life issue.
It is, absolutely.
You know who was a champion, even though he was horrible a lot?
Bulger.
Bill Bulger, former Senate president, was great on these issues.
Apparently he got chased off a beach way back then.
Know that
I was just saying he had a chip in his shoulder about the whole thing. But he never got anywhere either. And, you know, it does beg the question, Jim.
What is it?
When Billy Bulger was the Senate president, there was no more powerful person in the state, including the governor. So if he couldn't get it done, it makes me skeptical that they will be able to change these things. Because you know what they want? You know what's going to happen?
No.
People that own property on the ocean are going to sue the state.
Say their property was taken without compensation.
Yes, exactly.
So fine, challenge it, let it happen. You know, by the way, we should, before we take calls, should credit two people who've written. Miles Howard has a piece in the Globe this morning, but our colleague Chris Burrell has done wonderful ongoing reporting about this no beach access issue. Eliza, you're on the Cape, you're on BPR. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Excellent.
Okay, so I'm here, and my complaint is not the summer people, although they do make the beaches difficult. It's the people who come here for, like, they own beachside property. They'll come for 2 weeks. They put up ropes and stuff.
I'm with you.
They do everything they can to keep us off of their beach. And it's like, we're here year-round, and you guys are, like, setting up barriers for us to enjoy the very little time that this place is enjoyable. And it just feels so unfair to the rest of us that you guys can just like rope off this beautiful property and treat people who have kept this place running for the entire year off of the beach.
Can I tell you, you were the perfect first
that's
caller.
pretty bad.
Your level of outrage is exactly what everybody should feel. So do you crawl under the rope, or do you cut it, or what do you do, Eliza?
I just go through it.
I knew you would.
Come talk to me about it. If you have the confidence to come to me and tell me to get off this beach when I live here year-round, they don't have to deal with January on Cape Cod. We have to deal with January on Cape Cod. You get the 2 most beautiful weeks in August, and you get to rope off the most beautiful pieces of property.
Eliza.
And they're barely even on the beach. Like,
You were
they
fabulous.
barely even come down to the ocean.
Well, before you go, since you're an excellent caller, when was the last time you engaged in fouling, Eliza? Anytime recently?
Oh, not that I can remember.
Okay, maybe you should take that up. Eliza, that was an excellent call. I'm serious. That was a great call. Thank you very much. Everybody should be as upset as Eliza is.
Alex has got an idea.
What does he say?
Not that I would ever advocate violence, of course, but Alex from New Hampshire says the solution is to walk along the beach with a shotgun, and if anyone confronts you, tell them you are fouling.
By the way, we have discussed this in the past. Why
think
can't
that
you
would keep
say,
people-
well, I don't want a shotgun. Well, I guess, how about a bow and arrow? In all seriousness, why can't you be carrying a bow and arrow, and if you're stopped by a cop or a private property owner, say you're attempting to engage in fouling? You haven't caught anybody.
I guess you probably could do that. Mel from Littleton says we rent a waterfront house on the bay in Brewster every summer where low tide goes out for miles. Thanks for letting me know I can throw the families looking for crabs at low tide off the property.
That's true. Unfortunately, you can. I mean, it's. By the way, my understanding is I think it's Virginia, Delaware, and one other state, which escapes me, are the only other states besides Massachusetts which are on either coast. Well, I guess it's the southern coast too. On any of the coasts
It is
that
odd.
have a low tide or whatever that's called, waterline kind of approach.
877-301-8970. Peter from Wenham. What do you think, Peter?
Good morning.
Hi.
Well, I'm blessed because my grandparents bought their home in Situate on the beach in 1952 for $5,000.
Oh, my God.
And
Wow.
It included the beach in front of our house and the next house. And we've never restricted anybody from ever walking on the beach. In fact, we let a neighbor build stairs to have access to the beach so they wouldn't keep cutting across our porch. But my parents tried to give it to the town back in the 70s, and the town refused because they wanted us to keep paying taxes on it.
That's pretty incredible.
Oh, well, that's the point, too. The town's got a lot of revenue. Peter, you mentioned it's okay for you if people walk across the beach. But how about if they come up with like 7 chairs and, kids and...
No problem.
So you're you're okay with that?
Only when they park in our driveway without asking do we get upset.
You're a very generous
Peter,
guy.
what's your address?
Jim's coming down this weekend.
I'll text you offline.
Can I tell you, that is exactly the right communitarian approach. Peter, that was excellent. Thank you. Did you hear him say he let the neighbors build steps
Stairs
on the damn thing? Here's Kate Newton. So, Mr. Browdy, I guess that's me, lawyer on TV. If you're chased by the beach owner with golf clubs and say you're fouling, the police will leave you alone? Do you think they will or not?
I don't know. I suppose it depends on what town
Can you
you're in
research that?
and what kind of police officer shows up at the scene of the alleged crime, Jim. 877-301-8970. Camille and Franklin, thank you for calling.
Hi, Camille.
Hi.
Hi.
Now, you have to recognize my outrage about this is just piled on top of every other outrage we're going through right
Exactly.
Okay.
That's a very good point.
But
No, it is.
I am so... We tend to vacation in Scotland, and they have a law called Right to Roam, where, except for a few places, citizens can walk, camp, or go anywhere that they want to.
That's great.
And it creates a sense of community because you encounter farmers. You encounter other walkers. You get to go to extremely remote places. And all you have to do is make sure you're not taking a dog through the lambing season and that you're closing the gates behind you.
I think it's fabulous. What's with you in Scotland? Why Scotland?
We went there. I mean, I have some family heritage, but we went there in when I turned 40. And it's just beautiful. It's empty. And I can go there for less money than to Maine.
That's pretty good.
Wow.
Well, we should have the same right to roam here. Camille, thanks for sharing that with us. We really appreciate
Jim
it.
Rom from Lowell is confused. He says, isn't our legislature is actually working, he says? Aren't they on their 8th week of their 4th of July holiday?
No, actually, the 5-month vacation that we occasionally talk about is in the election year, even though virtually none of them have opponents. It's so they can go home and work on whatever they're working on, their re-election or something.
The roadside stands that sell umbrellas, floaties, and beach chairs should sell 99-cent slingshots, so everyone who goes to the beach is technically fouling.
Exactly. Let's go to Bram, I believe, in Florence, Mass, in Western Mass. Hi. Welcome, Bram. How are you?
Great, thanks. Well, I'm calling because I had a situation a few years ago where my wife and we live in Western Massachusetts, and we wanted to go to the beach.
Yeah.
So we're like, we'll go to the Cape, and we don't need to have a destination in mind because the Cape is an island, and it should be surrounded by a beach. But we drove up and down the Cape, and everything was just gated.
Yeah.
How'd you feel about that, Bram?
Well, I was wicked pissed.
Yes, exactly. That is exactly how you and everybody else should feel.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of big beaches in the Cape. The Cape Cod National Seashore is a huge beach. That's open to the public. Sandy Neck Beach in Sandwich is a huge beach open to the public. Craigville Beach is a huge beach open to the public. So there are some, but you have to know where to go. Bram, I want to have a question for Bram, though.
Yeah.
There used to be a great place in Florence called Miss Florence Diners that had unbelievable pies. Is that still there?
Oh, it's there, but to be honest, I think there's a place that sells better pies just down the street called the Pie Bar.
Pie Bar.
Oh, I love that name.
Thank you.
Hey, Bram, that was excellent. Thank you. Call us again. An anonymous texter says, all the beach access and many other issues could be solved if Marjorie runs for the legislature. What do you think, Jim? Remember, we had this discussion the other day. There was an uproar.
Yeah.
Marjorie for Speaker.
Speaker.
She'll bring sidewalks to New Hampshire while she's at it. That's a very fine point.
Anthony in Aquina, I think it's on Martha's Vineyard, says, eminent domain, just take the beaches back.
Well, we're being somewhat flippant about this, but, even if there's dubious constitutionality about changing the low water mark ownership to the high water mark, because they will argue you're taking their property without compensation, would you not agree the second thing I mentioned, that if a coastal community takes money from the state for any beach protection, that by law they should be required to give reasonable beach access?
Well, I think that's one of the arguments I mentioned before. Marshfield, I guess you can go down there if you park
a mile away.
Yeah, it's hard to get there because it's a long way to walk, a lot of beach chairs and stuff like that. But it seems to me if they want to build a seawall there and they're not letting people in, then they got to pay for their own seawall.
Exactly.
It just doesn't
in which case they'll probably let people in. By the way, an anonymous texter, this is for you, just tuned in. What is fouling? I missed the explanation. What is fouling, Marjorie?
Fouling is hunting for birds. That's what it is.
Here's another explanation. Another good, very clever anonymous texter. Just put on grubby clothes and a face mask and say you're from ICE, which I think actually will probably work. 877-301-8970. We talk about this every year, and mostly inspired by Chris Burrell's great work at GBH. And again, as I say, Miles Howard has a piece in the Globe today. But this is something that there's got to be some constituency is relentless about. When you mentioned a minute ago, I want to repeat what I said. You said, a lot of beaches, that you mentioned some of the beaches that are public. Again, that's 12% of the coastline.
You're
it's
right.
still a very small percentage.
It's a very small amount. Now, Elizabeth is calling from Newport. I don't know what the laws are in Rhode Island, but Newport's got a lot of big beaches, too.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi, how's it going? You guys are so funny.
Thanks.
Same here in Newport and the surrounding area. And this is a topic that just is so enraging to us because, like your first caller, we're here in January and February. I can't even take my dog to the beach after hours anymore.
That's horrible.
And it's horrible. So my father-in-law lived over in Wickford, which is a beautiful community, and someone who vacations a couple months out of the year there. A couple of years ago, he went down to the beach and was so enraged that this lovely family was sitting below the high tide mark. he grabbed their umbrella and threw it in the water.
Oh, my God.
Screaming in this man's face. Yes. All while this poor man, his children are watching his wife. He was subsequently arrested. But we decided that given the diversity that we have here in Newport, we would have my children's best friends come over. We were going to get, Black Lives Matter umbrellas and just pitch right up by the high water mark. Yes. So that was our plan.
Did you do it?
We definitely did go. We didn't have the umbrellas, unfortunately, but we did go, and we made a point of staking our claim down on that end of the beach.
Good for
and
you.
It is ridiculous.
We
go to the Caribbean a lot, and it's the same thing down there. You can access everywhere, as that previous caller was saying, in Scotland. We go down with like a 6-pack of Carib, and we're sitting next to people who have buckets of champagne and are getting massages on the beach.
My God.
Everyone should have access to the beach.
Perfectly put. Elizabeth, before you go very, very quickly, is your legislature any more responsive to the issue than ours is?
No, not really.
Elizabeth, that was a good one.
And you think of Rhode Island.
Like
Rhode
your
Island
strategies, thanks.
It's like one big beach.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much of it is owned by the public down in Rhode Island, but there's huge sections of beach down there.
By the way, here's an anonymous text. This is a good point. Jim, you could say you were hunting for fried chicken, which is exactly right. You don't even like fried chicken, do you? Too greasy for you?
I do. Yeah.
Fried chicken is the new thing, you know.
Okay.
Do you know that?
Okay. I didn't know that, but we talked about that last week. Where we were debating the fried chicken versus the cheeseburgers, and people thought that. Yes, we did that right here on the radio. You were here, Jim. You were eating the fried chicken.
I was. Oh, I was.
It just kind of washed over you.
I was.
Anyway, we're talking about the issue of beach access. If you don't own waterfront property, and almost nobody does, obviously, what do you do about being banned from a lot of the beaches around the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? More of your calls and texts. Listen to BPR and GBH and NEPM live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. The number is 877-301-8970.
A New York City museum is opening an exhibit of sacred objects from a Buddhist temple. Some people say artifacts like these don't belong on display.
I respect the opinion of people who are unhappy with these objects being in museums, but I also think that, there are multiple opinions out there.
What the controversy's all about, next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And Harrow International School, New York, offering day and boarding education for grades 6 through 12 on a 170-acre waterfront campus on Long Island, opening this fall. More information is available at harrownewyork.com.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Phil Ang, General Manager of the T, will be here live from 1 to 2 to answer your questions, etc. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about beach access or lack of same in Massachusetts. According to reporting by a number of people, including our own Chris Burrell, only 12% of the coastline here is accessible to the public, and that's not really that accessible to the public. So we want to know your thoughts. There are a couple things the legislature could do, but has not. What are you laughing about?
Listen to this. This is from Heidi in Somerville. My ex's family has a home with access to a private beach in Falmouth. Every nice day, rich property owners post guards or their hired help at the highway entrance to keep the public out. Once on the beach, homeowners grill visitors about who they know and how many chairs they're bringing. It's classist, exclusionary, gross, and sadly totally legal. And those are all great points. But remember we discussed one time about the issue of bringing your 10 chairs to the beach and organizing them and then leaving them.
Oh, that's a whole other issue.
Coming back like 3 hours later to
You mean
claim
even
your
where
spot.
you're allowed to be?
Yeah, you go down early in the
Horrible.
morning and you line up all your chairs, and then you come back later and get upset if someone has rearranged some of your chairs. Yeah, that's a big issue on a very crowded beach.
Well, you hope in those circumstances one of those seagulls craps all over the chairs. By the way, there's a guy, it's too long to read, but it said he used to own beachfront property in Beverly.
Yeah.
He was very open. He shared the property with Endicott College, and some of the students there were peeing on the property and doing other things he didn't describe. So, I mean, that's a reasonable excuse to go back to
well, that is one of the excuses
protective.
that people give in these stories that do have beachfront property. They say people take advantage. They come down and leave their trash all over the place, you know, and they
But why should they be allowed to own beach? I mean, to the high tide mark, I'm sorry to repeat myself, I'm okay with that, I guess, because if you owned it, you'd want. But beyond that, virtually no other state except the ones we mentioned did it. Why?
Well, that's the thing. You could still, and the thing is, the tide is going to come in. So the people that are down there on the low tide mark are going to have to leave sooner or later because the water's going to come up and to the high tide mark at some point during the day. What?
Dan Brown, the photographer who worked with Miles on the story in the Globe that we're talking about, just texted, "Thanks for sharing the topic. I'm coming in halfway through the conversation. Wanted to add your prior conversations with the director of the trustees, that's Katie O'Harades, helped inform my thoughts on access." You should go to their website. There's a lot of access there.
Yes, that you don't even know about. All these places that you can go to that are public. It's really great.
Well, not only that, and Katie, one of the things she implemented on her watch, we've mentioned this, I think it's Wingashiek, but it's one or more of their beaches.
Crane Beach?
Maybe it's Crane, but whatever the hell it is, look it up on the website. You can get a parking ticket in advance, I think the night before, with a specific time slot, so you don't have to stand in line forever or be in your car in line forever and hope you get in, and you often don't. David in North Andover, you're on BPR with Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. Hi.
Hi, Marjorie and Jim. I'm a first-time caller.
Thank you.
I have a little bit of. You're welcome. I have a little bit of background. The origin of this policy in Massachusetts goes back to a colonial statute in the 1660s.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the additional state you couldn't recall, Jim, was Maine.
I think you're right.
Maine has the same policy as Mass because the two, of course, used to be
one.
Massachusetts until 1820.
Yeah.
So this is where the policy originates. In New Hampshire, they have a different rule after the Revolution. The New Hampshire legislature changed the rule, or the statute, never applied in New Hampshire for some reason, the colonial statute. So a little bit of interesting history.
Well, it is interesting. I mean, the good news is, as you say, New Hampshire isn't as restrictive. The bad news is, Marjorie has made a point repeatedly, they have no sidewalks in New Hampshire. So that's a downside.
Well, they have a few.
But David, thanks for the history.
Somebody's just texting about Gloucester beaches. I've lost the text, but I just looked it up in the story. They're talking about how to go to Good Harbor, Wingashiek Beach up there.
Yeah.
The weekend and holiday rates have jumped from $35 to $45. The Stage Fort Park, the fees increased from $25 to $35 for weekends and holidays. That's pretty hefty just to go.
Right. I mean, it's essentially prohibiting average people from using the damn beach, right?
And as you said, all non-resident beach parking must be now reserved in advance. So you got to really plan ahead and have your money ready.
Okay. And again, let me repeat myself, if you don't mind. It's a little dicey if the legislature were to actually do something, which of course is unlikely about anything. But if they were to do something, the thing about changing the low water to the high water thing may be constitutionally problematic, but I would say do it anyway and let it be challenged. But there's no constitutional legal problem with saying if you take state money, let's say for climate resiliency on your coast, you got to let people who don't live in that town use the damn beach.
Yeah, but as I said before, you got to move fast because
5-month vacation.
Because pretty soon there's not going to be when you got to pass the high tide mark, you're going to be right in the water.
The other problem with the legislature is someone texted a minute ago and said, well, the 5-month vacation, I know you don't like, but they're 19 months they're working. The problem is the other 19 months they're preparing for the 5-month vacation. Let's go to Jeremiah. You got a minute. Take it away. Fairhaven. Hello.
Howdy ho there, neighbors.
And to you.
So I'm a kid from New Bedford. I moved across the river to Fairhaven when my wife and I married.
Nice town.
I live on the Neck, which is a peninsula in Fairhaven, and at the bottom of my street is a community beach that is deeded to 50 houses. All right, fast forward. I'm walking down to the beach with Kelly, and all these new people are on the beach. There's some Airbnbs in the area, and I had a little soliloquy moment where I said to myself, who are all these people on my beach?
Hell of a soliloquy.
And it sounded so ridiculous to me that I checked my privilege, I laughed with my wife, and I high-fived all the newcomers.
There you go.
You're a kinder soul than we are, Jeremiah.
Between the high tide and the low tide mark. That's very impressive.
He makes a great, it's not even the owners, it's the Airbnbers who have higher rights than average people.
It's outrageous, Jim.
You're mocking me, I know. This is serious.
Are we looking for you at the beach?
By the way, Marjorie Coe owns a house on the Cape. I wonder why she's not as upset as I am. Exactly.
But it is on the lake,
well, okay.
which is very nice. I'm not going to complain at all. I'm very lucky. Okay, we are done. Thank you very much for your calls and texts. We'll wait to see what the legislature does about this in the coming weeks.
Waiting.
I would say.
How's never? Is never good for you?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a
coming
response.
up after this quick break. It is our Friday media analysis segment. Press play with the Globe's Joan Vanacchi and the Bay State Banner's Ron Mitchell. You're listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the movie theater, Jaws is everywhere as it turns 50. We look at how it changed Martha's Vineyard, the island that became home to a Hollywood hit, how it changed the way we think about shark conservation, and how a mechanical predator named Bruce gives us a perspective on movies without AI. That and more on The Culture Show's Week in Review, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Porter Square Books, hosting Meg Stone with The Cost of Fear, about how to discern fact from fiction around safety from gender-based violence. June 29th at 5. Info at portersquarebooks.com. And Compass on the Bay, an assisted living community in South Boston for those with Alzheimer's and related dementias, with research-based therapeutic programming for those with memory loss. More at compassonthebay.com.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live from the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Governor joins us next Wednesday, 11-12 here at the library. In an hour at 12:30, Alba Musik doing flamenco. It is spectacular. We heard it this morning. And at 1 o'clock, Phil Ang, head of the T, joins us for an hour to take your questions and ours. It's time for our Friday media analysis segment, Press Play. With us at the Boston Public Library, Boston Globe Associate Editor and columnist Joan Vanacchi. Joan, it's great to see you. It's been a while. How you doing?
Nice to be here. Thanks.
Very good to have you. And with us is Ron Mitchell, editor and publisher of the Bay State Banner. Welcome back to you, Ron. Good to see you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Joan Vanacchi, let's start with you because you wrote this piece about Terry Moran. People may know. We've talked a lot about so-called anticipatory obedience, people doing things, universities, law firms, and media companies doing things not to annoy President Trump. Terry Moran is a longtime correspondent for ABC News. He called both Stephen Miller and Donald Trump world-class haters. Tell us what you said about this situation with Terry Moran.
Well, first, when I said yes, I didn't know I'd be analyzing my own writing. However, I thought that what he said was kind of over the top and over the line. I could write that as a columnist. You could say that on the radio. There are these kind of confusing lines now about what so-called reporters could say. On the other hand, to just fire somebody who'd been like a valued employee for as long as he'd been seemed like just another capitulation to Donald Trump and a big media company wanting to genuflect, and that I think is a mistake.
And Terry Moran was ABC, right?
Yes.
And I think we've discussed this about 1,000 times here. ABC is the station that did the $15 or $16 million settlement over what George Stephanopoulos said when he said that Trump had raped E. Jean Carroll when it was technically sexual abuse in New York, even though under our laws it would have been rape. Well, to add to ABC, apparently CBS News is on the verge of also cutting a deal with Trump. Sherry Redstone, formerly a local person, I guess, and not so much because the underlying case has any merits, similar to the ABC thing. They say that CBS 60 Minutes improperly edited a Kamala Harris interview to make it appear better for Harris than in fact it was, which every observer says is not true, but because Sherry Redstone wants Trump's approval for a deal that could net her somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 billion. I'm hyperbolic, I admit. It seems to me this is almost the end of Western civilization when it comes to news if CBS cuts this deal. Is it as bad as I think, or no, Ron?
No, I think it is pretty bad. I think that Trump has created an environment where these major media companies are just caving, and it's a shame. Journalism is supposed to be telling the truth and holding truth to power, and without those tools, our democracy is definitely in trouble. So it's a scary day sometimes.
I'm going to ask you a question, Joan, that I've asked almost everybody since these two people I'm going to mention were on. The same week, about, 3 months ago, Marty Barron was on, your former boss, former editor of the Globe, and Chuck Todd, who's with us every week, obviously former host of Meet the Press and doing some other things now. And I think it was in the wake of the ABC deal. And one of us asked the question of both of them as to, we know what's happening at the top, ABC management, CBS management. Why should we not think that it's also happening at your level, at the columnist level, even at the reporter level? The woman who, Ruth Marcus, was it Ruth Marcus who created the Washington Post, admitted in a New Yorker story that she wrote herself that she had censored herself in at least 2 instances, once about Bezos, once about Trump. Why should the consumer of your work not worry that you're not saying everything you think, or the reporter in Washington for the Globe is not saying all he or she thinks?
First, let me point out that Barron and Chuck Todd are both formers, which is...
That is a very good point. That's a good point. Well, they say they've spoken, both of them said they spoke to their former colleagues, one at the Washington Post, one at NBC News, whatever it's worth.
I think there's good reason to have a lack of trust in the media when you see that happening. If they come for Terry Moran, who's next? David Muir?
Yeah.
I can only say that it hasn't happened to me. I mean, I haven't self-censored, for better or worse.
Do you think about when you're writing, do you ever think about what you're saying?
About Trump?
Yeah.
Usually not. No, I mean, I don't mean to be flip about it. I mean, it is important to, have the right tone, I guess, and to put things in perspective. Do I feel like there's a target on my back? I don't think he's paying attention to me. That's my bottom line.
Who do you think is right there? Barron, who says, I didn't make it clear. Barron said it's not happening. And Chuck Todd, who says, I speak to NBC News people, and it is happening. I'm sorry I didn't clarify that. Do you think people are self-censoring, editorialists, reporters now?
I'm sure some people are self-censoring, but I think it's also the level that you're at. I think that most local papers and most, Boston-based papers, I don't think we censor. I think that, like Joan said, I don't think we're on his radar yet. I mean, we at the Banner try to find a even keel in general. I say pace the rage. I think that if all you do all the time is focus on Trump's erratic actions or things that seem to be unstable, then you get distracted from the goal, which is really moving the pendulum forward for everybody. So I say to all my friends who have the hair on end and steam coming out of their ears, pace the rage, focus on what you're doing, and, try not to censor yourself. Don't be afraid,
Could I just throw one thing in?
Of course you can.
On the censoring thing, I mean, there hasn't been a lot of commentary on Terry Moran.
Yeah.
No.
Really? I mean,
that's a very good point.
And I think...
You mean by other people in the business?
By other people in the business.
That's a fabulous point.
It's really
I think that's the fear, too. That's the tragedy.
So you think that is indicative of something?
I think it shows something.
Yeah.
But where's the outrage?
Yeah.
Well, not to get off topic, but remember when Barack Obama tried to ban some certain people from his press conference, and there was a whole grouping of other press people who said, what are you doing?
It was Fox News who he tried to ban, actually.
And now we've had this same going on with Donald Trump, the AP being exiled. You didn't see the same cooperation among other news outlets saying, well, if you're banning AP, we're not going to cover your whatever it is. And what do you make of that?
There's a lot of fear, genuflection, and I mean, I think it is what it is, to quote Belichick.
Whatever happened to him, by the way? Exactly. Okay, can we go to my other favorite topic, other than this self-muzzling thing? Marjorie, in 2016, said, I think Donald Trump is totally unhinged.
Deranged.
And we
or did
thought,
I say unhinged?
You
You're
said
right,
unhinged. I said, was it too early to say that, et cetera? Well, it is whatever it is. 9 years later, and this woman, Jennifer Welch, who I must admit I never heard of, is a podcast host who was on CNN the other day discussing the president's mental acuity, and she totally speaks for me. Here's a little bit of what she had to say.
It's just crisis after crisis. In this man, I have no faith in it all because he acts like a guy who got a day pass from the memory wing of a nursing home. I mean, when you see him on TV, he's slurring, he's not competent. It is just terrifying when you see the chyron that says, Trump is reviewing war plans. And as we're all sitting here, do we think that man is competent enough to review war plans?
You know, Ron Mitchell, my take on this, and I haven't done a statistical analysis. It seems to me if you added up all the stories about the mental acuity of Joe Biden, and next to it put all the stories about the mental acuity, or lack of same in both cases, of the current president, Donald Trump, Biden would be up here and Trump would be down here. If I'm right, is that also just self-muzzling kind of thing? Are we talking enough about whether or not there's mental competence in terms of the current president?
I don't think we ever truly judge our leaders' mental competence enough. I think once you get that title and you get into that position, there's a level of Teflon around you where people are going to carry your water and not call you out for certain things. I also think, and I don't mean to sound ageist, but I'm not sure how old the current president is.
79.
79. I have 79-year-old relatives. I don't want them reviewing war plans. I don't. And I love them. And they're some of the smartest people I know, but my dad just turned 90. I don't want him, looking at war plans either.
Why? You got a dad who's 90.
Yeah.
So can I, before you answer this,
yeah.
You're making a face at me, Joan, so I thought I'd play an example here. I couldn't interpret what it meant. Here is on Wednesday, Dick Durbin played a video compilation, I think he put it together, I guess, of Trump over the years to try to highlight what he considered to be Donald Trump's cognitive decline. Here's just a little piece of this.
The windmills are driving the whales crazy, obviously. I have concepts of a plan. They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating... Give me a glass of water. Let me drop it on the magnets. That's the end of the magnet. The kidney has a very special place in the heart. This is a tough hurricane. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. When you ran out the healthy arms, you ran out of really healthy. They had great arms, but they ran out. It's called sports. It's called baseball in particular.
Yeah.
Can't understand a word he's saying.
Okay, that is fairly funny were it not the President of the United States. Do you think we give adequate coverage to...
What am I supposed to say to that? I mean, the issue is Trump's base is still with him. Biden's lost his base. As long as his voters are still with him,
I'm not talking about the consequences.
It is what it is.
No, but your response is a political response. I don't care what the consequence is going to be. It seems to me it's an obligation to report and say, I don't mean columnists, obviously you can say whatever you say, a reporter to interview somebody when he makes totally incoherent comments.
I think it is. People do interview. There are stories about it. The New York Times has written about it. People write about it.
I don't think there's nearly enough.
There's an acceptance level.
I also think that Trump's presentation by design is erratic and unconventional. When COVID started, it was drink the bleach. Just things that were just so insane from the beginning.
But that's just totally uninformed and no concern about being
But
uninformed.
he started uninformed, and then now, transitioning. Now, is it uninformed? Or is it Alzheimer's?
You agree with Joan?
That's
sorry,
the
go ahead,
question.
Joan.
I'm just glad he's waiting 2 weeks before he decides about Iran.
We're going to get to his 2-week standard in a little while in the show.
So the Karen Reed trial has become a national sensation, in some cases an international sensation. Yesterday we did a whole half hour on why everybody's so obsessed with this whole case. So last night I'm having dinner with my son and daughter-in-law. They live in New York City. They live in Brooklyn. They didn't really know about the Karen Reed case much, but then they read yesterday's Globe. We spent the whole dinner time discussing the Karen Reed trial and the details of whether she did it, whether she didn't do it, and I thought, well, this is why it's become a sensation, because people don't really know what happened. There's a divergence of opinion about what happened. But what's your theory? I mean, Beth Teitel has written the funniest stuff about the Karen Reed trial with don't drive after 8 o'clock at night in Canton because everybody's had 19 drinks at the local bar. You'll get run off the road.
Well, I'm probably in a minority position in that I thought or think that she did more than drive under the influence. However, I mean, I agree with the general analysis that they overcharged her. The incompetence, if not corruption, of the investigation just undermined what they were trying to do. Why are people so fascinated with it? Some of it is what they call white woman syndrome.
Exactly.
I mean, she's a very attractive young woman. I don't know, change.
Very attractive white woman, as you said a minute ago.
Change.
That was Gwen Eiffel who came up with that line.
Change gender, change skin color. I don't know if the interest would be as high. That's a piece of it. I also think there's just pure escapism to it.
Yeah.
That it's much more kind of fun to take that apart than figure out whether or not, think about Trump's cognitive abilities.
Yep.
I was at CBS Television when this happened, and I actually was...
The verdict, you mean?
No. I was working with CBS Television at the time when this happened, and I actually was there the night. I filmed the house. And
on Fairview?
Yes, I filmed the house that night. I happened to be on the job, and I still see the footage I shot on CBS Television Action. But I think that people forget that when she was first charged, there was a whole bunch of alleged questions about what was going on in that house and the multiple other individuals who had presence in that house that night, and that house was sold quickly. There was a lot of, and I say alleged, things that happened that called into question all of the elements. And I think that we forget about that now so many, a year and a half, 2 years later, and two cases later.
Don't forget about the dog. The dog
Chloe.
was
Exactly
the
right.
German Shepherd.
Right.
That's
They sold the house, they redid the floors, they re-cemented, allegedly all these things, and instantly. So I think that people in the community, and I think it was a similar thing that would happen in the black community. If you see somebody and there's a question whether they did it, but then there's all these other peripheral things and elements around, you go, well, maybe she did, but all this other stuff happened so quickly that it called into question from the very beginning, in my mind, the case. And then after that,
What were you going to say, John?
I was just going to say, so will anyone else be charged in the murder of John O'Keefe?
Well, we discussed that yesterday.
You think what I think. You think she backed into him. I think she did it by accident.
I
don't
do
think
too.
she did it
I
on
do
purpose.
Too.
And but they just couldn't prove the case. But I also thought it might have something. We've only had one juror speak so far. But I
didn't hear it. What did the juror? I'm sorry, I missed that.
The juror
what did
just basically said there wasn't enough. There was too much reasonable doubt.
Okay.
But he did say that people went into the jury room, some thinking that she was guilty.
Right.
Really?
And they changed their minds.
But I thought there was something about the whole police sloppiness thing here. We read a lot about problems with the state police, writing tickets for tickets that shouldn't have happened. And, the head of the union guy, he's in trouble for whatever he did. Sending
the police lab.
Yes.
Monumental.
Yes.
Tens of thousands of cases.
So there might be some distrust of the cops and just thinking they weren't going to convict someone on the testimony, particularly the one that was using, Proctor, that was using the misogynist text and stuff. They weren't going to convict someone on the basis of these police officers.
Globe did a great editorial, obviously, as you know, on these very issues the day after the verdict, talking about overcharging and sloppy police work, which hopefully somebody will pay attention to. We're talking to Joan Bernanke from the Boston Globe and Ron Mitchell from the Bay State Banner.
So we talked a lot during the election about the so-called bro-sphere, all these podcasters, Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, all these other people that are capturing huge numbers, millions of people, particularly of young men. And I was listening to a lot of these guys because I thought that's what my duty. And they're very charming, very talented, very funny. Rogan is really is good, but they're not journalists. And so when people get on there and lie about things, they don't have the knowledge to correct the lies.
Or don't choose to correct
Or don't choose to correct the lies. It was funny, we heard Ken Burns on, he did 3 hours with Joe Rogan about his career and about his new thing on the American Revolution, and Joe Rogan didn't get a word in edgewise, and when he did, it was only, wow.
Yeah, but when Ken was with us the other day, and when you said you thought it was Ken, that Rogan had been totally uninformed, Ken took issue with you.
No, he did. He said he read a lot of the back history.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point of these articles is that these people are taking over where we used to be, Joan, at the Globe, etc.
Oh, so you want me to respond?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm probably not a good person to talk about Joe Rogan. I've tried to listen and I fall asleep. And again, I fall asleep during the 28 minutes of the daily.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I 3 hours is a long time.
It's a long time.
The guy deserves credit. If people stick with him that long, it takes a lot less time to read the Globe.
Yeah.
But what provoked, let me just say, what provoked Marjorie's question is for the first month ever, I think it was last month or maybe the month before, the Joe Rogan, quote, news sources of the world, for lack of a better expression, in terms of consumption by the public, exceeded people going on watching TV or news websites. That hasn't happened before, and that to me is almost as scary, if not more scary, than the CBS News capitulation.
This is a reflection of a trend that I spoke about before that's been coming for a long time, and it's the difference between journalism and influencism. When you have folks who run podcasts, their job is to get as many people to listen to their podcast. That's the motivation. Not to be a journalist, not to tell the truth, not to present the news, but to get people, to influence people to respond to what they say, to get a response, to get clicks. And it's also a reflection of our news, which is getting more tribal, where everybody goes to watch the news that they already agree with, as opposed to try to find a middle ground and get elements from all sides and understand intelligently what is best and what is true out of the news. So I think that it's a reflection of both things, and broism, folks, gathering together to talk, that's nothing new. That's
it's not just
a
bros.
reflection of the hair.
It's young people in general, particularly
men,
are rejecting television, not watching TV news.
When you get your news on your phone, when that's where you receive it from, then it's easy. Again, that's why we in our paper are trying to get.
Joan just raised her hand. Since she raised her hand, we feel an obligation to recognize her. Joan Vanocchi, go right ahead. Thank you.
I'm going to say the obvious, that Democrats haven't figured out a way to counter it as far as influencers. At the DNC in Chicago, a long story, but I ended up sitting with influencers that were supposedly influencing from the Democratic side. They were a great, fun bunch of very young people, not journalists, taking selfies and all that. But obviously, what they were doing didn't work. Now the Democrats are doing what? Spending some incredible amount of money to figure out how to talk to men. That's a problem.
Well, they also didn't come up with, the Republicans brilliantly said, let's do Project 2025, so if we're ready for action. The Democrats don't do that. They don't know how to message. They don't know how to influence. We talked years ago, and it's less so the case. In terms of the podcasters, one of the biggest problems, it seems to me, about the left-leaning podcasters versus the right. The right, starting with Rush Limbaugh, who obviously is not a podcaster, understood the humor had to be part of the deal. And the left, historically, with some wonderful exceptions, and obviously there are some wonderful exceptions, never quite grasps the notion if you don't entertain as well as inform, you're going to lose your audience.
Well, Theo Vaughn was a comedian, or still is a comedian. Yeah. So I think that's the thing, that they're just much more charming and appealing and easy to listen to.
He's a very good, very successful stand-up comedian.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's easy to make the transition.
We only have 30 seconds, so let me say, we don't have time to discuss in any depth. One of the other problems, I think, where editors have made a big mistake is allowing news reporters to go on and approach but allegedly not cross the line in terms of opinion stuff. Like we're CNN addicts. But when you see Maggie Haberman, who's been writing about Donald Trump all the time, sort of opine, even though she tries not to cross lines, that creates doubts in the minds of a lot of people, and they say, what's the difference? And creates a problem. It's good to see you both, by the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What's the website? Bay State Banner website?
BayStateBanner.com.
BayStateBanner.com. We all know BostonGlobe.com. Great to see you, Joan and Ron.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in, both of you, Ron and Joan. We've been speaking with Boston Globe Associate Editor and columnist Joan Vanocchi and editor and publisher of the Bay State Banner, Ron Mitchell, for our weekly media analysis segment, Press Play. The show continues here in Boston for you listening at any PM. Thank you very much for tuning in. You can tune in to the fabulous 413 starting at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Monty and Khalees will broadcast live from the Green River Festival at the Franklin County Fairgrounds. Boston Public Radio continues here on GBH after the noon news with Live Music Friday with Alba Musik. It's going to be fantastic. Labor expert David Weil, and as the MBTA GM, he's going to be with us filling from 1 to 2, taking our questions and yours. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues up ahead with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio, right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Moonbox Productions, presenting the 4th Annual Boston New Works Festival, celebrating new original plays by local playwrights, June 26th to the 29th at the Calderwood Pavilion and the BCA. Tickets at bostontheaterscene.com. Pioneering singer-songwriter Janice Ian was just 15 years old when she found herself in the limelight, forced to overcome industry misogyny, homophobia, and even death threats. Watch Janice Ian Breaking Silence tonight at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 2 of BPR, live from the BPL. We'll start the noon hour with Alba Musik for live guitar and flamenco dancing at the library. They join ahead of a show at Long Live Roxbury.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then President Trump campaigned on being a champion of the working class. How's he doing so far for labor? Well, we'll ask David Weil, who served in the Department of Labor in the Obama White House. Plus, our Two More Things segment before Philip Ang joins us from 1 to 2 for Ask the MBTA's Boss. It's all next on BPR 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Israeli military says Iran fired about 20 missiles at Israel today, hitting buildings in Tel Aviv and Haifa. Several people were seriously wounded. Israel says its forces struck Iranian nuclear sites on this 8th day of Israeli attacks designed to eliminate Tehran's nuclear threat. Iran's foreign minister was in Geneva today for talks with some of his European counterparts. NPR's Lauren Frere has more on that from London.
The foreign ministers of Britain, France, Germany, and the European Union are all meeting Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. The Europeans are urging a return to diplomacy after days of war, but Tehran wants Israeli bombings to end first, with Iranian state TV quoting Araghchi as saying there's no room for negotiations with the U.S. until Israeli aggression stops. The Trump administration says it'll decide within 2 weeks whether to join Israeli attacks. British Foreign Minister David Lammy says that's the window now for any diplomatic solution. Lauren Frere, NPR News, London.
NPR's Frank Ordonez reports on division inside MAGA, including reaction from former Fox talk show host Tucker Carlson and former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, a day after President Trump said that he would decide within 2 weeks on whether to take action against Iran.
In announcing that 2-week delay, the White House says Trump is following his own instincts and that Carlson and Bannon's position did not play a role. And I should also note that not everyone in MAGA world opposes U.S. involvement. Mm-hmm. Folks like Fox News' Mark Levin have enthusiastically called for Trump to help Israel in the war. And so have folks like Senator Lindsey Graham, who has traditionally taken a more hawkish stance on foreign policy.
NPR's Franco Ordonez reporting. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says Ottawa will impose new tariffs on U.S. steel and aluminum imports starting July 21st. But as NPR's Dan Karpinchuk tells us, Carney says that will depend on trade negotiations with the United States.
Carney would not say what the new tariffs would be, but July 21st coincides with the end of the 30-day deadline for a trade deal that was mentioned when Carney and President Trump met on the sidelines of the G7. Carney also says Ottawa will limit federal procurement policies to favor Canadian suppliers and what he describes as reliable trading partners. And he will announce new retroactive tariff quota rates on imports of steel products from non-free trade agreement countries. They will be at 100% of the 2024 levels. There will also be task forces for steel and aluminum to help guide the government's decision-making. Earlier this month, President Trump doubled existing tariffs on steel and aluminum imports to 50%. For NPR News, I'm Dan Karpinchuk in Toronto.
From Washington, this is NPR News. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals says President Trump does not have to relinquish control of California's National Guard to Governor Gavin Newsom. More on this from Steve Futterman.
The 3 judges on the appeals court panel all agree that the conditions here in L.A., with police and protesters repeatedly confronting each other, were sufficient enough to allow the president to deploy the troops. California Governor Gavin Newsom unsuccessfully argued that Trump exceeded his authority. On his Truth Social platform, Trump called it a big win. California officials are still trying to restrict what National Guard troops can do while they are deployed.
Steve Futterman reporting. 10 critically endangered black rhinos have a new home. Their 48-hour journey from South Africa has led them to Mozambique, where black rhinos had been locally extinct for half a century until now. And Kate Bartlett has their story.
5 male and 5 female black rhinos were donated to Mozambique by a South African wildlife park, and the relocation of the rhinos was organized by the Peace Parks Foundation, an organization founded by former South African President Nelson Mandela and others. Rhinos were declared extinct in Mozambique 50 years ago, and their reintroduction to the country now is part of conservation efforts. South Africa's Environment Minister, Dion George, said establishing new founder populations of the animals was, quote, critical to securing their future. Earlier this month, South Africa also sent 70 white rhinos to Rwanda by air as part of a rewilding initiative.
It's NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include EBSCO, committed to providing colleges and universities with relevant online research databases to ensure student, faculty, and staff success. Learn more at ebsco.com. This is NPR.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Programming note here, Governor Maura Healey is going to join us here at the library from 11 to 12 this week. And later in today's show...
Next week.
Is it next week? It's not going to be this week?
This sort of Friday. You know,
yeah,
right?
It's going to be next Wednesday... few days from now, 5 days from now. Got me all boggled up.
Just show
here.
up whenever you want. She'll be here.
Yeah, she'll be here. Wednesday, 11 to noon. And then later today, we're going to be speaking with the MBTA's General Manager, Phil Eng. He can take your questions and ours if you call in. And we also have a homie mic here in the library. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. So you made it to another round of Live Music Friday, and when you hear them, it is Live Music Friday. We're joined now by the New York flamenco group Alba Musik, led by the duo with us today, singer and dancer Bárbara Martínez and guitarist Alabedra. After I did it right, I got it wrong. That's pathetic, isn't it? You're a very kind soul. They're performing on Thursday at Long Live Roxbury. We'll tell you about that in a minute. The Long Live Roxbury Brewing Company, plus another show in Providence next Friday. It's Alba Musik with a K, albamusic.com for info, or you can find them on Instagram at Alba Musik, again with a K. Right now, here they are performing the piece Al Alba, yes, okay, for Live Music Friday. Welcome to you both. We're thrilled to have you.
Viene y no importa cuán oscura sea la noche, el alba viene y la soledad se derrite en pleno derroche, pintando todo poquito a poco, derramando brillo, levantando sueños, regalando una segunda oportunidad. Cuando llegue el alba, solo el alba lo sabrá. Toditos los caminitos, toditos los caminitos que caminaré contigo. El alba lo sabe, un nuevo día, ayer no existe. El alba lo sabe, sorpresas para los corazones abiertos. Lo más oscuro de oro se viste, iluminando un nuevo día. plata, marfil, ámbar, rubí, lila, siena, rosa, menta, plata, marfil, ámbar, rubí, lila, siena, rosa, menta. El abrazo del sol siempre viene y te veo al alba te veo al alba te veo. No hay luna sin sol, día sin noche, sombra sin luz, alba sin fe. Ay, te veo al alba te veo al alba te veo. Cada uno brilla en su propia luz. Cuando llegue el alba, solo el alba lo sabrá. Toditos los caminitos, toditos los caminitos, toditos los caminitos que caminaré contigo. Toma, ale. Eso. Toma. Caminito, caminito. Caminito, caminito.
Alabedra and Bárbara Martínez from Alba Musik, M-U-S-I-K. Check them out at albamusic.com. They're going to join us up here on the stage.
And they're going to be performing Thursday at the Long Live Roxbury Brewing Company. We'll tell you all about that. And next Friday at a show in Providence, Rhode Island. You go to Alba Musik, and it's MUSIK.com for more information. Or you can look for them on Instagram at Alba Musik. That was fantastic, you guys. Thank you so much. I shouldn't say you guys. Gentlemen and ladies.
I think you can say you. I think they'll forgive you.
Yeah, they'll
What'd
forgive
that
me.
song mean, Bárbara? What were you singing about?
The song is all about the beautiful colors that come breaking through the darkness when you get gifted with a brand new day and wanting to meet you there.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell people that don't know, I mean, we'll ask you, Albert, what is flamenco?
Flamenco
Yes.
is like the traditional music from Spain.
Mhm.
It's like a deeply rooted music that happened in Spain.
Yep.
But it had many influences from other musics and other music styles.
And cultures.
And cultures. So flamenco, I would say, is probably like the way it is right now, 150, 200 years old.
Yeah.
But it had like centuries of influences, blending in the Iberian Peninsula.
So is it generally, so the dancing is mixed in with the music, and is it generally guitar, or you play with percussionists and other instruments as well, right?
Right. We
Yep.
have a big family that is part of this Alba band.
Yep.
But, flamenco at its essence started with the voice and the clapping.
Yeah.
And, maybe some people to enjoy moving around with it. So later on, the guitar was added as definitely an essential part of the textures. But yes, percussion, we have, thanks to Paco de Lucia and his sextet, we have the flamenco cajon, which was taken from Peru, but, has its grandmother from Africa.
Okay, let me ask you another question. You look like you're wearing regular shoes, but you must be wearing tap shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I mean, that is incredible. You're moving so fast, and you're able to make so much noise, frankly, with your feet.
So much noise?
Yeah, you are. You're
We
banging.
don't call that noise,
Well,
Marjorie.
it's dancing, but I mean, it's really.
It's percussion.
Yes.
We consider ourselves flamenco dancers percussionists too. We are another musician on the stage. And I don't know if you noticed, this isn't such a traditional thing that we just presented, but it's based on the tradition of flamenco. And flamenco is very much about, connecting and looking and feeling and being in the moment with each other. And we don't necessarily have a plan from the beginning what we're going to do and how, but we're looking and we're listening to each other. So
it's very sexy.
And it feels sexy to be
I think so.
heard
Yeah,
and
don't you
watched.
think?
So the
Jim
move-
thinks
do
so.
I do. I love flamenco. Do the dance moves have specific meaning, or do they not?
I've been told by Kathak dancers and Bharatanatyam dancers that they feel that it's really connected to what they do in India, right? Indian traditional dance. And it is possibly because the Roma gypsies came from northern India to Spain. But what we're doing with our hands is more of an expression of the feeling of what
Right.
Albert's doing on the guitar, or what if there's a singer when you're dancing, you're interpreting the music and the poetry. It's not so literal like Indian dance has, is telling a story with certain shapes of the hands.
So I'm guessing when Albert's playing, if you're feeling differently at a particular time, the dance might be different. Is that
Absolutely, and the singing and the playing, everything.
I do love flamenco music. I know not. We've only had a couple of flamenco performers through the years here. How big is the audience for this in New York City? You're both New York City based. How big is the audience for this?
I mean, I would say, thinking about the New York population, the audience is small, but it's big enough to have a scene.
How did you two connect? What's the deal here? Has it been a dozen years? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Looks like you don't want to tell us. Let's try anyway. How did you meet?
No, it's funny because every time they ask us this question, we don't remember.
We don't exactly remember.
Yeah.
We don't remember how we met, actually.
Yeah.
Someone asked me. That's honestly true. Yeah.
Well, I remember.
No, it's not
forgets
true.
It.
It is
I
really
made a
not
big
true.
impression. He said I met him
That's
several
not
times.
true.
He had no idea.
Whatever.
But you write the music
Third
together.
time you were great, though,
Thank
by the
you.
way. You really were fabulous.
You write the music together, so this has been a very successful
This is
collaboration.
this is a composition collaboration, and in addition to composing and recording together, we primarily love performing live. That's really where my experience comes from, and maybe the same for you. And so it's been a lifetime of performing and getting to kind of just share these special moments with live audiences, which I live for that. But it's also great to leave something behind that you've crafted and thought through a certain way. And I'm exploring this whole world myself.
So Jim asked you about how big flamenco dancing is in the United States, or New York you were specifically talking about. But you're Venezuelan, related to a famous tango singer, I understand, and you're from Spain.
Right.
So is it still this very much part of the whole cultural scene? If you're a little kid growing up in Spain, a little kid growing up in Venezuela, is this something that's going to be part of your childhood, or is that not so much true anymore?
I would say it depends on the region.
Yeah.
Spain, where you're from. If you are from the south, from Andalusia, maybe it's more familiar to you. Even people assume that you are from Andalusia, oh, you must dance flamenco, and that's not true.
always the case, yeah.
Maybe 5% of the people can dance, so means 95 cannot dance. But
is that how it started for you? Was it in your town, in your family, in your culture?
I mean, in my family,
Yeah.
because my mother is from Andalusia, my grandparents from Sevilla, from Córdoba, so yeah. For me, when I grew up in Barcelona, but I always listen to flamenco.
That's where they're squirting the tourists
They
that come
are.
from the United States.
No, it's only a few people are squirting the tourists.
So we won't go.
It's very hot anyway. It's great. It feels great when you get
is it really that overrun? What's the deal with Barcelona now?
With tourists, she means.
Yeah, it's crazy with tourists.
It's crazy with tourists.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? You're going to get the squirt guns out, Jen.
I think
no
not.
question about
So
it.
Barbara,
Doing
you've
us a service.
you've done Long Live Roxbury. Have you not done it in the past?
Yes, yeah.
Tell people, and by the way, Sue Claire, who has introduced us to it's her
Happy birthday,
today.
Sue!
Happy birthday to Sue.
cumpleaños.
Tell us, for people who don't know Long Live Roxbury, tell us about the place.
Well, from what I remember performing with Gonzalo Grau and Plural, it was a very special place. It's basically a craft, ¿cómo se dice? Un beer brewery, craft brewery. And so you're in the middle of these like tanks, and it's you can actually see a lot of it, and the stage is right in the center there, and the beautiful sound. What a great audience comes here, because I believe every Thursday they have really, really interesting, very unique groups from all over, the world, really. And so every Thursday they've got, a jazz night, and that's when we participated.
And do you have a fairly new album? Yes?
Yeah.
Dawn, yes?
How long? It's probably...
That was our first album.
Oh, it was? Do you have
in 2022.
Do you have a current one now?
We just released a song yesterday, the day before yesterday.
Is that what you're going to play?
Yeah.
Oh, fabulous. Well, tell us about that.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's our summer hit.
What do you mean, all right? You don't want to do it? You don't want to tell us about it?
Keep all of the songs straight.
Okay.
Yeah, no, what you need to know about this song is actually probably one of our most lighthearted creations. We were thinking of the summer that's coming, and this project, it's all about keeping hope and wonder and joy sort of fresh in our...
I just wanted to mention too that your album is you made the first round of the Grammys, which you may not say is it's not the top, but you're competing in Latin pop against people like Bad Bunny and Shakira. So making the first round is very impressive. Both of them, right?
Yes,
Twice.
Yes.
So that's a big deal.
It's
so
an honor.
Congratulations
Thank
for that. Yeah.
Well, also, Shakira never shows up for a concert, so she shouldn't even be considered anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
The thing is that there's only one category. If you
For
sing
Latin music?
No, if you sing in Spanish.
Oh.
If you sing in Spanish...
There's one category?
Only one, Latin pop.
That's ridiculous.
That seems unfair.
It's a little strange.
I think there should be a separate flamenco section myself.
You do?
Absolutely.
That exists in the Latin Grammys.
Yeah. It does?
Yeah, that exists in the
Well,
Latin
that's
Grammys.
good.
But in the US ones, no.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, Marjorie's very connected, so I would assume that'll change
I'll
in
make
the
a call.
relatively near
I'll make
future.
a call.
So tell us the name of what you're going to perform again, Barbara.
It's called Menos Bla Bla Bla, Más Glu Glu Glu.
Okay.
I really meant it when I said it's our most lighthearted song, and it's basically paying homage to the art, the lost art of the pickup line. You know?
Great.
If someone makes you smile, it doesn't even matter what happens after.
Hold on, wait a minute. You're going to sing this in Spanish, correct?
Sí.
Okay. Well, what is the best pickup line? Could you tell us, please?
There's so many funny ones.
Yeah. Give us a couple.
Okay, which one's your favorite one?
Let me see. So she says one that says, perro no soy, estoy guau contigo, which I don't know how to translate that in English, but it means...
Sounds like bow. I'm not a dog, but
Sounds like bow?
But
As
I'm
in
bow,
wow?
wow for you.
God.
Okay.
And that's a good pickup line?
Okay.
They get better.
Okay. They get better.
So do you want to gently put your headsets down, and Marjorie will tell people once again how to get tickets, how to get information on Alba Musik, and all that sort of stuff.
We are listening, as we said, Alba Musik. They're going to be Thursday at Long Live Roxbury Brewing Company, and they're also performing next Friday at a show in Providence. AlbaMusic.com for info. That's Alba, ALBAMUSIK. K at the end, not C at the end. AlbaMusic.com for more info. You can also find them on Instagram at Alba Music. And here they are going to perform their next song for us.
Welcome back.
Menos bla 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 y más glu glu glu. ¿Quién me separa de un bombón como tú? Menos bla 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 y más glu glu glu. Al guru, guru, guruga. ¿Qué te parece si me das tu presente y yo mi futuro? Serás Google que en todo te busco. Me tengo que comprar un diccionario porque desde que te vi estoy sin palabras. En matemáticas eres la suma de lo que deseaba, menos bla 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 y más glu glu glu. ¿Quién me separa de un bombón como tú? Menos bla 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 y más glu glu glu. Al guru, guru, guruga. parece si me das tu presente y yo mi futuro? Serás Google que en todo te busco. Intentaría ser ese chicle para estar todo el día metida en tu boca. Hasta me inquieta, al menos ponte ropa, menos bla 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 y más glu glu glu. ¿Quién me separa de un bombón como tú? Menos bla 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 y más glu glu glu. Al guru, guru, guru gam. Toma. Perro no soy, estoy igual contigo. Si fuese tú, estarías conmigo. El color que más me gusta verte será un banco, tiene mi interés. Me gusta mucho donde hago like, tiene tu boca, una lengua más. Quien fuera visco, pa' verte doble doble. Me gusta el café, y tenerte.
That was great, you guys. That was great.
We've been listening to Alba Musik. They're performing Thursday at Long Live Roxbury Brewing Company. They're also going to be performing next Friday at a show in Providence. For more information on tickets and how to find their next performances, and their albums, go to albamusic.com. That's ALBAMUSIK, albamusic.com, or find them on Instagram at Alba Musik. Thank you very, very much for coming in.
Fabulous.
Coming up
Thank
after
you
this
so
quick
much.
break, President Trump has won the majority share of the working class in the 2024 election. Has he delivered on his many working class promises? Former Labor Department official David Weil, who served under President Barack Obama, says Trump has not, and he says that, in fact, the president has done far more harm than good for working class America. David Weil is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Ongoing ICE raids have led to a massive slump for businesses in Latino neighborhoods of Los Angeles.
Our community is genuinely scared to leave their homes at moments, and many of the vendors here are also afraid to open shop.
We take you to a beloved Mexican market, El Mercadito, to hear how business owners there are holding up on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Benchmark Senior Living. Benchmark's Mind and Memory Care program is committed to instilling dignity and independence for residents by offering personalized care plans, working at every residence's pace. Locations and more at benchmarkseniorliving.com. And Newport Mansions, presenting 11 historic properties and landscapes, including 7 National Historic Landmarks, tracing America's architectural development from the colonial era through the Gilded Age. Tickets at newportmansions.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Next Wednesday from 11 to 12, the governor joins us here at the library for an hour. Take our questions and yours. And today at 1 o'clock, the general manager of the MBTA, Phil Lang, will join us for an hour to take your questions and comments as well. In the 2024 election, Donald Trump reversed the historical pattern of working-class voters supporting Democrats, winning most voters without a college degree. He tapped into the economic issues that were, according to most exit polls, the main voting concerns for those non-college educated workers. Here we are, 7 or whatever number of exhausting months from November. Has Trump delivered on his campaign promises to working-class voters? Not so much, says labor expert David Weil. David is the former administrator of the Wage and Hour Division of the U.S. Department of Labor under President Obama. He was supposed to hold that same position in the Biden administration, but you may recall he was the first Biden nominee to fail on the Senate floor, thanks to some of our favorites, Senators Kristen Sinema, well, actually, Mark Kelly I like, and Joe Manchin joining Republicans in opposition. He's now a professor at the Heller School for Social Policy and Management at Brandeis, which he used to run. He's also Kennedy School connected. David Weil, great to see you again. Thanks for coming back.
Than's for having me. Great to be here.
So as Jim said, President Trump made a lot of promises, a lot of them having to do with immigration. A lot of people think he's shut down the southern border, and many Americans are happy with that. But on working class issues, he did promise a lot to the working class, but you argue that he is not. And give us an example. Talk about what he's not done that he said he would.
Well, I think the things that he's done that people expected is a great deal of hostility to the labor movement and to organizing, and he's taken actions, for instance, with the National Labor Relations Board and taking out labor members of that.
Yeah.
In a way, that was expected. I think the parts that people are less aware of, but they really hurt working people, is what he's doing for other parts of the Department of Labor and kind of dismantling a lot of important programs.
Like what in particular, yeah?
Well, near and dear to my heart is the Wage and Hour Division, and that division enforces our most basic labor standards, minimum wage, child labor, overtime, all of our guest worker programs. That agency hasn't had an increase in its budget since I ran it way back in 2016. And not only have they decided to not ask for an increase, they've actually, in the proposed budget of the Secretary of Labor, decreased the budget of that agency by $25 million, which means when I was there were almost 1,200 investigators. Now they are close to 600. And that means that if people have complaints about wage theft, if people feel that they're seeing child labor, there's no one to go to because of these kinds of long-term staffing cuts that are made all the worse by the secretary.
We're going to talk about a lot of things that you think have done damage to workers in this country and their unions. And Marjorie and I were talking about the motivation for this morning. I'm assuming, this is a question, not a statement, it's his gift to his big business supporters, and you're nodding in agreement. But on the flip side, his big business supporters, who may be applauding everything you're going to talk about in the next few minutes, including what you just mentioned, are hugely dependent upon undocumented workers. And
That's
for
right.
about a minute and a half last week, he doesn't tweet. He posted on Truth Social, hospitality, restaurants, agriculture, we're going to stay out of it. And then apparently the dog killer, Kristi Noem, and Marjorie's favorite, Steve Miller, got together and said, no, and Trump reversed himself. So he's giveth on one hand and he taketh away on another. How do you reconcile those things?
Well, I think he is in some crosswinds because, as you say, some of his biggest supporters on the business side need immigrant workers to run their businesses. We couldn't have houses built and buildings built in this country without immigrant workers. nor could we have the hospitality
And
industry.
he can't run his own properties without immigrant workers, by the way.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So he's hearing a lot from that, and I suspect we're going to hear more waffling in the future on that because of that. The flip side, and what is really, again, so damaging to working people, is it creates an environment on the workplace, at the workplace, where folks are just not going to be willing to come forward and even ask for government intervention if they're getting their wages ripped off. That applies certainly to immigrant workers who will fear being deported, but it also applies to other workers. That kind of fear of complaining spreads.
Is there evidence? Have you seen? Do the numbers reflect? The diminution in what would be expected in terms of worker-raised concerns about working conditions and those sort of things?
Well, like a lot of their policies, they've pulled down a lot of the transparency that used to be available so that you could actually see how many complaints were coming into the wage and hour division. And that's a whole other thing they've attacked on information available to both the public and even using information internally in ways that are probably bad for working people. What I do know, and this is from some studies I've been recently doing with a colleague at the Kennedy School, Danny Schneider, working people, even in the face of really bad violations of their rights, don't complain. And if they do complain, and this is during the Biden administration even, they tend to complain to their boss or to the HR department. They are very fearful of going to the government. And the environment Trump has created makes that all
Why
the
were they
more
worried about going to the government under Joe Biden, who was probably the most pro-union president, pro-labor president of our lifetimes? My wife says this all the time, who you know very well.
Right.
And I assume she's right, and you're nodding in agreement. So
Yes,
go ahead.
yes. No, I think he was pro-labor. I think we underestimate the fear in workplaces about coming forward. I mean, when I was at the Obama administration, we were fighting against this. We were fighting in the wake of the Bush administration that had been very hostile to workers coming forward. But I think there's always been a palpable level of fear of complaining to the government. It's just been raised much more.
Well, you were talking, David, a lot about the wage and hour division, but there's also, OSHA that people, I mean, you would know better than I, that groups of people will complain about something their fear is against their health in the workplace,
Right.
whether it's asbestos or something like that.
Right.
What is the status of OSHA? Or in terms of mining safety, Trump is a big fan of coal mines, as we know,
Right.
that are very dangerous. So what do those agencies look like?
I think it's a similar story. First of all, the budgets aren't there, and so OSHA, like Wage and Hour, and MSHA are down investigators. One of the early things that the Doge people posted were reductions in actual offices of OSHA and MSHA. They were actually closing tons of local offices, basically posting the leases are up and we're not going to renew them. That's a direct message, again, to workers, to advocates, to businesses who are complying that, don't worry so much, we're not going to be there. There was some pushback in the mining community that Trump loves to put on hard hats and go to mines and say he's friends of workers. That led to them reversing themselves on getting rid of some of those leases, but the money is still not there, and he's now appointing people who are very much in favor of cooperation and not doing kind of vigorous enforcement.
One of the things about mining, you always hear about this terrible black lung disease thing, and I'm wondering if when people do file suits or if they are impaired and they can't work anymore, is their status worse now as well?
Absolutely. I mean, this is, again, one of the functions of a local office. If you suffer from black lung, that's the place you go to get your benefits, to appeal, to coordinate your health care. They're enormously important. Right now we have a lot more retired miners than actual coal miners, and so many of them suffer from black lung and related diseases. And so this is, again, a message. We're kind of saying goodbye to you folks and our obligations to you.
Do you think people realize this? I mean, sometimes I'm always stunned by things like the child care tax credit, which was a big thing in the Biden administration, which raised, I think, was like almost half of the children in America out of poverty.
Yeah.
And then it got taken away, and nobody seemed to notice.
Right.
So, I thought people would notice. It was a big reduction in their monthly income. But I wonder sometimes if people even make the connection.
I think people don't underestimate. I mean, I think people do underestimate the role of the government in making workplaces safe places and enforcing basic rules. And I don't think it's gotten the play. Individually, I think it has. There were very evocative stories reported in the New York Times of several families suffering from black lung that was having incredible problems getting the benefits they needed. So there's reporting out there, but I don't think people connect the dots about how this not only affects workers there, but it affects them. I mean, I think there's ripple effects every time you say we're not going to respond to enforcement or we're not going to worry about a problem like black lung. People pick that up.
By the way, but Trump, I don't have your expertise, needless to say. Trump's a different animal, though. I mean, when you see interviews, I've mentioned this a million times, Jake Tapper interviews a small business person on CNN every afternoon. How are the tariffs affecting you? Oh, I lost half my workers, and I'm going to have to shut down my business. You still support Donald Trump? Yeah. I still, in any case, we're talking to David Weil, former head of the Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor under Barack Obama. He's at the Heller School at Brandeis and at the Kennedy School. It's very hard we occasionally, David, I know it's a ridiculous venture, we attempt to rate the sadism of Donald Trump, and it's a very difficult task. I would have to say, though, of the things I've read that you've written and spoken about, the child labor thing, to me, is the most egregious and the most sadistic. Fill us in on what's happening on that front, please.
Yeah, child labor, there have always been child labor problems related to, young people are allowed to work in restaurants and in certain tasks in grocery stores for a long time if you're above the age of 14. Mm-hmm. And so there were always violations there, kids working too long, kids working in the evenings when they're not supposed to. What started to appear on the scene about 3 or 4 years ago were kids working in meat packing plants and in the middle of the night cleaning the kinds of tools that are used to cut up beef and chicken and so on. We saw kids working on the roofs of construction projects. We saw kids working in packaged food companies. These are places we hadn't seen kids in decades.
But this is under Joe Biden.
This started under Joe Biden, unfortunately. And it was happening in some of the biggest named companies in the food business. Purdue had cases, JBS Meats, which is the largest global meat processor. They were happening at lower levels where labor brokers and intermediaries were bringing kids, many kids who were here under protected status as minors, unaccompanied minors, who were really being preyed upon by these local labor brokers, but then funneled into these big companies. The Biden administration certainly was caught off guard by this problem when it first surfaced.
Did they do anything about it?
And they did a lot about it. These things require not only the actions of my old agency, but also the Solicitor of Labor. It takes a lot of investigations to really nail these kinds of problems. And they had a very aggressive set of policies, both in pursuing them and then in bringing them forward as major cases with settlements. And they did a bunch of very innovative things in not only trying to bring up responsibility to the top of these chains, but getting restitution for the children, giving them some kinds of benefits out of that.
What kind of penalties are there for an employer who you were able to demonstrate, which I assume is not easy, knowingly hired children, minors, in violation of law? Do they get a slap on the wrist, or are there real penalties?
Well,
and if there aren't real penalties, it's almost like a disincentive to follow the law, right?
That's true, and I think our basic laws are still very weak on that. They were raised substantially, but we're still talking about I forget the actual number, but it's somewhere in the $150,000 per violation. Now, what the Labor Department was doing in the Biden days was really being aggressive in accumulating not only current but evidence of past violations. So they were bringing multi-million-dollar civil monetary penalties against these companies.
What's happening now?
Right now, I don't think they're investigating these cases, or they're doing it in a limited capacity. I listened this morning to the Wage and Hour Division nominee from my former position, and he talked the talk about being concerned about this problem as he was being pushed by some of the Democrats on the Senate committee. But again, if you don't have the resources, and not only do you not have the resources in wage and hour, you don't have solicitors out there ready to take these cases, and you need them to aggressively pursue them.
Can you remind me, I knew this and I forgot, what was wrong with you, allegedly, according to Sinema and Kelly and Manchin? You were too aggressive in pursuit of justice? Is that what the inhibitor was? I'm serious.
No, I think that it was, I had the audacity to want to vigorously enforce the law. I mean,
that was your first mistake, my friend.
And Senator Kelly actually said that in an interview after he voted against me. He said, well, the business community was concerned about Dr. Weil's aggressiveness.
Yeah.
I thought that's what sheriffs are supposed to do, but apparently not.
You know, I always think, and maybe it's just being naive of me, but when I think, and we heard some of this during COVID about people, they were in the meat packing plants and they were right next to each other and there was fighting about whether they could, be far enough apart and all this kind of stuff. Unless people that run these companies are really cruel people themselves, especially when it comes to having children or teenagers do this under duress. I mean, are they just really horrible people, or do they? They're all doing very
well financially.
Can I answer that one? Yes,
the answer is yes.
Well, I was interested in what David said too. Because the people that own these they're very wealthy.
Right.
So it's just, I don't give a damn.
Well, it's more cagey than that. Yeah. What you often hear is what I would call the Casablanca defense. I'm shocked there were children who were here.
Okay.
And the way companies, and this was not only true for the meatpacking companies and Purdue, but it's also true for Quaker Oats and some of the big food manufacturers where there were kids, working in ovens in factory conditions. And I should add, auto companies. Hyundai and Kia had kids on stamping floors. In all these cases, the kids were there through intermediaries and not by the direct hire of these big companies. And what they typically say, and this was something we fought against in the Obama administration, it's been a longstanding problem. They say, well, they're not our employees.
Plausible deniability.
Yeah.
It's very much that. And so, they can say, we're going to fire that terrible labor broker. But the reality is then they go hire another labor broker. And there's no reason to believe it's going to be any different with that one if they're not taking greater responsibility.
Can I just say, we just got a text from someone who said, I just lost it, but you're being unfair, Jim, Marjorie, because you're not mentioning an area where he made promises to workers, he being Donald Trump, the candidate, who is carrying through on them, namely overtime. And the taxation issue. Well, that's why you're here, David Weil. What was Donald Trump's campaign promise, and how is he honoring or dishonoring that promise?
So, candidate Trump, and he's going forward with it as part of his big, beautiful bill, was to eliminate taxes on overtime. And he made that sort of as an off-the-cuff idea in one of his campaign stops, and actually Vice President Harris picked it up and also adopted it. The reality is it's a pretty meaningless benefit to many working people. Well, number one is it doesn't take away the need for people to still pay payroll taxes on those additional earnings. It has no impact on that. And secondly, many low-income workers who are dependent on overtime still are underneath the income threshold for exemption. So there's not much tax benefit. So it's something that sounds good. It's going to be primarily beneficial to the small number of workers who do work overtime and have relatively high incomes. And there are workers like that, but they're not the kind of workers I think we should be losing a lot of sleep over. Who are
the workers that get overtime that are high-end workers? You think they'd mostly be salaried, no?
They are mostly salaried.
Yeah.
The ones who still are getting overtime, there are people who work, for instance, on oil rigs, who work on an hourly basis, and they're pulling in a lot of money.
David, isn't the same true about tips, that a lot of the tip workers that depend on tips are also making so little income that they're not going to be paying big taxes anyway?
That's exactly right. And President Trump made the same promise to them that they're going to exempt taxes on tips. The payroll tax problem is the same problem as you're suggesting. the problem of having a low income and already not having much to pay. But what's really pernicious about the tip side is we could have spent all our time at Wage and Hour chasing down wage theft of tipped workers. It is the easiest kind of labor violation to commit, is to not pay people the minimum they're supposed to be paid as a tipped worker.
This is mostly restaurants.
Yeah.
How does it work in restaurants?
Well, in restaurants, very often, what's supposed to happen is that there's a certain wage called the tipped wage that the restaurant's responsible for. They're supposed to be allowed to use the tips taken in by those workers to bring them up to at least the minimum. If they don't get the minimum, then the employer is supposed to make up the difference. The reality is that often doesn't happen. And so you can have people who, I remember having brunch when I was down in Washington and talking to a tipped worker on a slow Sunday. I didn't identify what I did as my day job. But I said, how are you making any money today? And she said, well, I probably won't make any money today because, I won't get much in tips. And I said, well, that's illegal for your employer not to pay you. And she said, oh, I know, but I've been waiting tables for 10 years, and that's just how we do it. So the fact that, in a way, this proposal makes tipped work allegedly more attractive is only going to put more and more people exposed to this kind of wage theft. Getting back to overtime, the other thing about what the president is not doing is pursuing an expansion of overtime coverage to workers.
Which Biden did.
That was, which we did. A federal court stopped us in our tracks. The first Trump administration didn't appeal that, so it went back to the old overtime standard. Trump passed a very, very low-level overtime change when he was there. President Biden increased that substantially. Again, it was taken to court, and again, it looks like the Trump administration is just going to let it die, and so we'll be back to his pretty weak standards.
Is it safe to say you never got invited to a cocktail party? You don't, right? I mean, no one. It's like, talk about a purveyor of bad news.
Yeah, no.
We only have 30 seconds. Is there a Democrat who you would say has messaged, I hate that as a verb, these kinds of issues well in an attempt to convince workers that they're not getting what they paid for?
The person who was very articulate about this, who is no longer a senator, is Sherrod Brown.
Yeah,
I think, and he walked the talk. He was, certainly during the Obama administration, one of our best supporters. I think he articulates it well. He talks about his own family and his history in a very real way. I think that is one of the problems of the Democratic Party. They're trying to keep some of their corporate friends happy and speak to some labor issues, but there isn't an articulated person like Sherrod Brown out there. They need to have one.
David, we hope you come back soon. That was really helpful and of value. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We have been speaking with David Weil, who served as the administrator of the Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor during Barack Obama's second term. He's a visiting professor of public policy at Harvard and a professor of social policy and management at Brandeis. Thanks again, David, for coming in. After a quick break, just enough time left in the hour for our Two More Things segment, where we cram in two more things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, their books are under attack, banned from schools and libraries across the country. Now authors are joining the movement against book bans, from writers to activists using their voices off the page. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And American Repertory Theater, with the hit musical rom-com Two Strangers Carry a Cake Across New York. The Boston Globe calls it clever, funny, and delightfully surprising. Now playing. amrep.org. And New England Botanic Garden at Tower Hill, a garden destination 50 miles from Boston. Visitors can discover summer with thousands of blooms, twilight experiences, art exhibitions, and educational programs for all ages. nebg.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy live from the library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. About 10 minutes away from Ask the General Manager of the Tea. Phil Lang will take your questions. And as Marjorie said, it's now time to, quote, cram in two more things. Cram away, Marjorie.
That's right. Well, you heard the word within the next 2 weeks. It's because the president uses it an awful lot. He's always making his decision about whether we're going to bomb Iran or not, and it's going to be in 2 weeks. And he said this the other day, and people thought, the reporters listening, that the whole 2-week thing sounded a little bit familiar and perhaps also a little bit slippery. So here is a compilation of all the times President Trump has said he's going to decide something really, really important in 2 weeks. Here it is.
Do you still believe that Putin actually wants to end the war?
I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks, within 2 weeks.
You trust President Putin? You know, in about 2 weeks.
I'd rather tell you in about 2 weeks from now. You can ask that question in 2 weeks. I'd say over the next couple of weeks. Wouldn't you say? I think so. Over the next 2-3 weeks. We'll be setting the number. I will make that decision, I would say, over the next 2 weeks.
At some point in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I'm going to be setting the deal.
And I think I'll go to a couple of these towns over the next 2 weeks. You'll see for yourself.
And I'll be making a big decision on the Paris Accord over the next 2 weeks.
I think you're going to find some very interesting items coming to the forefront over the next 2 weeks. We're signing a health care plan within 2 weeks, a full and complete health care plan.
Okay, so maybe we too could be president if we decided everything in 2 weeks, Jim, but I'll let you know in 2 weeks.
Oh, Brum-pum. Thank you very much. Well, that's pretty good there. The other day, a bunch of former legislators, members of both parties, by the way, in Massachusetts, held this press conference to unveil two proposals from, it's called the Coalition to Reform Our Legislature. There's only one I'm going to mention today. It relates to the stipend system. And this is the system which currently allows legislative leaders to reward, which I would describe as own, O-W-N, legislators, rank-and-file legislators, for loyalty, not performance. The legislation this coalition is proposing would tie any salary bump to a legislator above their base salary to performance. I'm sure you read in the Globe, we talked about it, many legislators get stipends for becoming chairs of committees. Now, you may have also read in the Globe that a number of these committees have never met, have never considered legislation, have never had a hearing. So I assume people think reform is a good idea, except the legislative leaders who won't comment on the proposals at all will not even allow the proposals to have hearings before the legislature, which reinforces the notion that Beacon Hill will remain the place where good ideas go to die. The only reason I bring this up, besides the fact that it's a good idea, Jake Kaufman, who's a former legislator, is part of this coalition, said if the legislature thwarts them, which they clearly will, they may go to the ballot directly to the voters. He compared this to the 72% who voted for the audit of the legislature. I'm with him. It's an expensive thing. But all I'd say in the interim is when you talk to your state rep or senator, ask them where they stand on this stipends based on performance, not loyalty. And I would consider their response when I went to vote. Good for these people, even if it doesn't go anywhere overnight.
Okay, Jim.
Coalition to Reform Our Legislature is what it's called.
To reform our legislature.
You know, by the way, you know when they're meeting next?
In 2 weeks.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you. But I'm
okay. Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, we're going to be joined by Phil Eng, General Manager of the MBTA. He joins us for the remainder of the show. He'll be here from 1 to 2. He's going to take our questions and yours for another edition of Ask the MBTA General Manager. 877-301-8970 is the number to call or to text if you want to get through to the General Manager. And also we got a homie mic there with our Nicole and the audience, the people in the library want to come up and ask Phil Eng a question as well. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
GBH is more than just a news station. We are your local public radio station. We understand the importance of a local lens. And if that community angle is important to you, let us know. Donate at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And Blythewald, with big, beautiful bamboo birds. 6 sculptures in the gardens, 15 to 30 feet tall, by artist duo The Mythmakers. Blythewald.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of VPR Live from the Boston Public Library. It's Ask the GM with MBTA General Manager Phil Lang. He joins us for the hour to answer our questions and yours about all things public transit in and around Boston.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Do you have questions about train delays, service changes, transportation funding, whether it's okay to drive in the bus lane? Call or text us at 877-301-8970, or better yet, come on down to the BPL to ask Philip Eng yourself. Ask the MBTA's General Manager is next on the third hour of BPR 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The head of the United Nations is urging Israel and Iran to give peace a chance. The Security Council held an emergency meeting a short time ago for the second time since Israel began its conflict with Iran 8 days ago. NPR's Michelle Kellerman monitored the UN session.
As Israel and Iran continue to trade missile fire, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls this a defining moment for the world.
The expansion of this conflict could ignite a fire that no one can control. We must not let that happen.
He tells the UN Security Council that the confrontation is already taking a terrible toll. Israel says it acted because Iran was racing to build a nuclear bomb. Iran says its nuclear program is peaceful. The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog, Rafael Grossi, says he can guarantee a, quote, watertight inspection system, and says a diplomatic solution is in reach. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
President Trump has said he would decide within 2 weeks whether to take action against Iran. Well, how much is Trump's base divided over what comes next? Sarah Longwell is a political strategist and publisher of the conservative website The Bulwark. As Longwell explains in an NPR interview, many people backed Trump believing he would be an anti-war president or waiting to see if he reverses course.
One of the dangerous parts about Trump is that the kinds of people who have his ear, like Laura Loomer, big online influencers, those are the kind of people who moves Trump's decision-making. So I think his denials that this has nothing to do with it is wrong.
Sarah Longwell on NPR's Morning Edition. A federal appeals court says Trump can keep control of the National Guard troops deployed to Los Angeles. Guy Marzorati of member station KQED reports the decision puts a challenge from the state of California on hold.
The ruling from a 3-judge panel on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals cited evidence presented by the Trump administration, including that protesters threw objects at ICE vehicles. The court said Trump deserved deference for his response, sending in the National Guard over the objections of California Governor Gavin Newsom. The president celebrated the ruling in a post on Truth Social, saying, quote, "This is a great decision for our country." Newsom said in a statement the state will press forward with its legal challenge. The ruling means Trump can maintain control of the Guard while the case moves through the courts. For NPR News, I'm Guy Marzorati in San Jose.
The British Parliament is a step closer to approving end-of-life legislation. Members of Parliament voted in favor of it today. The bill allowing terminally ill people over 18 in England and Wales to apply for an assisted death. The legislation now heads to the unelected House of Lords, and it is subject to more revisions. This is NPR News.
Afternoon with the latest from the GBH Newsroom. I'm Henry Santoro. If you're one of the many Massachusetts residents who buy, rent, or lease a cable box from your television provider, you could soon see an increase on your bills. Why? Because state revenue officials confirmed last week that those transactions are now subjected to the state's 6.25% sales tax. Revenue Commissioner Jeffrey Snyder signed a directive last Friday declaring that the sale or rental of any cable box device that can do more than connect a cable system to a TV broadcast receiver and allow for parental controls is no longer exempt from the state's sales tax. Clark University in Worcester has released a wide-ranging restructuring plan that'll cut full-time faculty positions by up to 30%. Officials at the school say the restructuring will also merge its academic programs into 3 new interdisciplinary schools. The university announced earlier in the month that the changes will take place over the next 3 years, with retirements and voluntary and/or involuntary reductions in staff. Clark's fall enrollment is 80 to 100 students short of projections, and the university faces rising operational costs as well as international enrollment issues. The university currently employs 228 full-time and 101 part-time instructional faculty members. In sports, Red Sox open a weekend series with the Giants in San Francisco tonight. NBA Finals, Pacers beat the Thunder last night, forcing a Game 7 for all the marbles. That takes place Sunday in Oklahoma. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, home of the Name Your Price tool, so drivers can see coverage options at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Wednesday of next week, Jim. Today's Friday. It's going to be next Wednesday. We're going to be joined from 11 to noon by Governor Maura Healey for another edition of Ask the Governor. We'll ask questions, and you'll get a chance to ask questions, too.
That is correct. Hi, Marjorie.
Hi, Jim.
Hi again. So, speaking of the governor, during her January State of the Commonwealth address, Governor Healey attempted to talk about transit, and then this happened.
When we took office, trains were barely moving. So we hired an experienced general manager for the T in Phil Ang. And Phil, yes.
Wow.
Yes. In Phil we trust.
Oh, my God. Right now we're joined at the library desk by that same guy who got a standing ovation at the State House. Phil Lang, of course, is the general manager of the MBTA. He's here with us for the rest of the hour, taking our questions and yours. If you want to speak with him directly, ask a question, make comment, complain, whatever you want, give us a call or send us a text at 877-301-8970, as many of you have done, by the way, already. Good questions. And if you're here at the library, you can find our colleague Nicole, who is right there, and you could ask a question, potentially, depending on what it is, directly from the mic. Phil Lang, great to see you. Welcome.
Great to see you. You know, Jim and I have been around for a long time. I would dare to say I've not heard applause like that for anybody that's at all close to politics in Massachusetts. So congratulations to you, Phil.
What'd that feel like? I mean, you're the general manager of the T. I mean, really. What'd that feel like?
Well, I'll just tell you, right now you just threw me off balance with playing that clip. It certainly is appreciative, but it really is a testament to the workforce and what they've been doing.
I knew you'd say that.
You know, some of the folks that came with me here to Massachusetts, but also the team that we put together. But, you know, 2 plus years ago, we've been working on rebuilding the workforce. We've been hiring a lot of frontline employees, and we've been working on how do we train them and how do we give them proper tools. And their fruits, you know, of their hard work are coming through. That helps morale. That helps us get better at what we do. And yes, I've gotten the accolades for that, but it really is the 8,000 people behind me, as well as the public and the support of the governor, the legislature. We couldn't have done it without actually everyone putting a big focus on transportation and the importance of us getting this right.
Okay, the lovey-dovey stuff is over now because I'm under a lot of pressure from my family down in Massachusetts, Fall River, and my friends. They know I'm going to talk to you today, so they want me to ask, and I'm going to make them happy to ask about South Coast Rail. There's been some complaints about the sound from the station all night long. I guess people are close to where the train's idled or something. It makes a lot of noise, and some people are complaining that the trains are late. So what is the latest on South Coast Rail? It goes to Fall River and New Bedford.
So just a few weeks ago, I went down and with a number of the local delegation, met with the community because two things. Aside from the meetings we had to deliver the project, it was important for me to go back and get the feedback directly from them. There are things that I see, there are things that I read, and things that I hear. And the concerns that they have right now is the noise that emanates from the yards. Some of the noise that emanates from the trains and the horns, which are required by FRA from a safety perspective. And then some of the issues that encounter when there are some delays with regards to service. So twofold. It's important for me to hear. I've committed to going back to talk to them as we continue to look at some solutions. And just as we had always envisioned, we're going to monitor the service that we're doing today, including the concerns for noise. We're looking at things that we can do. I don't know what was really discussed necessarily in the years leading up to this project and the public outreach, but I do know that as we continue to deliver more rail service, whether it's South Coast Rail or across our whole territory, one of the things I need to do is look at how do I actually interact with the communities that we serve. More service does mean more yards, it does mean more trains, but how do we do that? And so some of the other things, aside from noise mitigation that we will look at, keeping the area clean and looking at schedules as well, because robust service, all-day service does mean early starts, late starts. So those are the things I fully heard and I fully appreciate.
Can we go back a little further? No, before you, I thought this was where you were going to go. The idling issue you're addressing, it was off to a pretty rocky start. After years and years of promises, you finally make it happen. The initial period was not a very smooth period for South Coast Rail.
Well, the first 4 weeks actually ran well.
Then what happened?
Then the weekend, I don't remember exactly the weekend, but we had 2 weekends where there was availability of crews. And Keolis had trained sufficient operators and conductors to run the service, but on those particular weekends, the availability fell short, so they needed to have more robust. They continued to train more conductors, more locomotive engineers. They also trained managers. The second week, they proactively brought buses in, and we proactively decided to cancel some trips because it's better for people to know that we're going to be taking buses versus last-minute cancellations. After those 2 weeks since then, we've run, I think, 7 consecutive weekends where no trains have been canceled, aside from where there was an incident up north stream of the area, but regarding availability of the last 7 weeks. And that's due to the qualifications of getting more people. The unions have worked with us to ensure availability. So that's one piece. From an on-time performance piece, some of the things that I'm looking at right now is, I get often asked about what's the next expansion project. I think what we really need to look at is not just expanding outside our perimeter, but where we have currently single track territory, we need to do double tracks. Where we have the need for...
South Coast is single track, right?
There's a long stretch of single track territory on the old colony line that really is a bottleneck. So if something happens along there, you can't get around it, right? So those are the kinds of things where really, if there's a second phase, that's my second phase, double track, old colony. So how do I continue to deliver more robust service, but also make sure when I'm doing it, it's more reliable? It's eliminating those pinch points, those areas where, just like if you're driving on a highway, if you go from 3 lanes to 2 lanes, it just bottlenecks.
Yeah.
Okay. One last thing about this. I'm just curious. The diesel trains are idling in like 2 and 4 in the morning. Is that because they're being worked on, or why aren't they shut off? Can you shut them off or not shut them off?
Well, there's the ability to plug in, but one of the things as well is we're running early service for people that need to get into Boston, or vice versa, for people that want to come from Boston to New Bedford and Fall River. And at the same time, if you go into the city, you want to be able to get out of there. If you go see a show, if you go and have a dinner, you want to be able to come back. It means a 90-minute trip, you're actually getting back to those locations late. So with that small window, there are times where there are inspections being done, and power needs to be on. Having said that, those were the things that the community raised to us, and we're taking a look at operations. We're taking a look at streamlining those windows, and we're also looking at the levels of service that we're running, as well as the ridership, because there's things that we knew that we would always be investigating is after the first schedule, how is that best suiting the needs of not only South Coast Rail, but everyone in between.
I want to ask you a budget question without boring people, and then we're going to get to the calls and texts at
877-301-8970.
We read that the legislature decided in a compromise between House and Senate numbers. The House numbers were higher, Senate numbers lower. $535 million from the millionaire's tax. The extra money is going to go to the T. We asked you last time, and you didn't have an answer then. I think you said you look into it. I asked you, how much of your budget is federal money? You didn't know last time. Do you know?
Well, from the operating side, actually, not a lot of the dollars for operating are federal. The federal dollars are a lot of capital.
How much money are we talking about?
Roughly. It varies. It varies from project to project. It varies from different grants. So for instance, the Draw One Bridge project that we have, it's $1.2 billion, and $472 million of that is federal dollars.
Is that at risk in your estimation, the federal monies? I mean, they're not, needless to say, the Trump administration is not crazy about Massachusetts. Some guests have said he's targeted blue states more than he's targeted red. You worried about losing some of this federal funding?
I've said this everywhere. Federal dollars, whether you've won it or you've not won it yet, is no guarantee with the flow of it. Right now, those dollars that are obligated, they're not at risk. The other dollars that we're working through the process, only thing I've seen right now is it's taking longer. I've not seen any dollars being taken away. And right now, the conversations I've had in D.C. with USDOT, FRA, FTA, and the goals that they have, what we've been doing at MBTA is finding ways to deliver more with the dollars we have, make our taxpayer dollars go further, and deliver safety and service. So I think a lot of things we have is a good component to what they're trying to do. And that's my commitment right now, to keep making sure every federal dollar delivers that. If for some reason a grant we're not successful, then those are the decisions that I have to make. Is it mean that the replacement that we wanted to do needs to be scaled back to give me, instead of 50 years, and give me 20 years, right? Give me the ability to keep the system safe, but also make decisions on, I'm not going to make an investment that precludes the longer-term goal. Those are the important things that we need to do, and then focus on my existing infrastructure, keeping it safe, keeping it running, and keeping the level of service to what people want.
But don't you need to have backup plans for, even if it turns out the direct federal grants to some of the capital projects you're talking about aren't at risk and don't become at risk, the state budget, which you're hugely dependent upon, is going to take a huge hit. There's no question about that in terms of federal dollars, even if they're not transportation targeted. So are you already making contingency plans for less funding as a result of indirect or direct federal cuts, if you understand what I'm saying?
We're, as far as contingency from a capital side, there's never enough to do what we need to do. Okay. Federal dollars are important, Jim. I will say this, though, so for instance, World Cup 2026. Every agency across the nation is going to be asked to do more than they've done before on a normal day, right? How do you serve the masses of people that want to come to our community, our homes? Right now, we have a bipartisan effort where the host cities across the nation have reached out to the Congressional Caucus, pursuing $400 million for operating dollars across all of the host cities, including Massachusetts and Boston, to support our needs. Those are the dialogues that we have to continue. We're not going to just assume those dollars are gone, and we're going to keep pushing for every grant that's available.
Understood.
So my thing is always I have to be ready to pivot, but I'm not going to just assume the money's not there and keep moving forward, because all of these projects are important.
We're talking to Phil Lang, General Manager of the T, 877-301-8970.
Mary in Waltham, you are on with Phil Lang. Thank you for calling.
Hello, Mary.
Hi.
Hi.
Phil, I have a relatively simple question from my point of view.
Yep.
It is very difficult for me, living in Waltham, to check the balance on my Charlie card. I can't call anybody. I can't log into someplace because they keep saying you need to go to a station. There's no station in Waltham. So what is your possible resolution of this issue?
Well,
thank you, Mary.
First and foremost, regarding your specific thing, we'll get your information from GBH, and we'll make sure we reach out to you directly.
So don't hang up, Mary. We'll get your contact info. Continue, Phil.
Regarding our fare system, our fare structure, and account management, one of the things that we rolled out last year and continue to improve developments to make it even better was the contactless payment and the single payment method, meaning you can not only look at your account with one mode, you can look at your account for all the modes. We want it to be where you can access it, whether it's online on your mobile device or stations if it need be. But what we want to do is make it more simple for our riders, and we've seen that at properties across the world. A single payment system, a single card, a single account is the best way to have it. But certainly we'll take care of your situation directly. And the cubic system is still continuing to work. So folks that have discounts, student passes, monthly tickets, all of those will be actually on one system and all the modes ultimately.
Mary, don't hang up again. We'll get your contact info and give it to Phil's people. Thank you for your call.
We have a real fan, Scott from Worcester.
What do you say?
He says, I love Phil Ang. Are you married? There you go.
By the way, there's a really interesting piece in the Globe, I think the magazine. Phil and I were talking about Patty Wen, who's
she did
a
a great
fabulous
job.
reporter, did a great profile on Phil and his family and his work in New York and here. And if you're interested, you should read it. Mike on Charlestown texts, I lived in Boston when they had extended late night service. We broached this with you a few times ago, and it worked very well, at least so says Mike. Any updates on bringing the service back? In a city that is losing residents to cost, I feel that it would greatly help late night workers, service, hospital, etc., as well as improve safety and nightlife in Boston. How about it?
If I could just comment on Scott, my wife, who's in the audience, will say I'm married to my job.
Is she?
I'm actually very lucky to still be married. She's put up with a lot.
Where is she? Where is Phil Lang's wife? Is it where?
She's right in the middle there.
Hi there.
Oh,
Caroline, right? Is that Caroline? Carol. Hi, Carol. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you very much for coming in.
We want to talk to you afterwards about what he's really like, so stick around.
Yeah, we wonder if you were in the meeting where your husband got those huge applause, would you have been standing up to join the crowd? Yes, okay.
No comment, exactly.
No
How
comment.
about late night service there, Phil Lang?
So one of the things I think as all riders across all modes have seen, even budget by budget, and God bless the budget that's proposed right now because it gives a lot of stability, and all the efforts we've done over the last few years, now we can build upon. If you're taking a look at what we've done, every mode we've started to build back our level of service, the number of trips we're running, not only faster, shorter waits, but more trips, and that's all of the modes. Some areas we've been able to extend even further, and certainly late night service is something that I still want to look at because I do know personally how important it is to a lot of people, healthcare workers, retail workers, and back when COVID was occurring, one of the reasons that we continued when I was at Long Island Railroad to run 24/7 was because of those people. And it really was 3% of our ridership, but they are essential to everything we do. And the ability to use mass transportation is something that I'm focused on, being able to give them that option. So more to follow.
Thanks for your question. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
Sarah in Dartmouth, thank you for calling.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I have a question for Mr. Ang.
Yep.
I live in Dartmouth, South Coast, and we have the commuter rail, which we love. And my husband and I wanted to take the rail to Logan so we could leave on vacation. And we wanted to confirm about overnight parking so we didn't end up with a ticket in the end. And I tried calling the helpline, and they were wonderful, very polite, very helpful, but didn't have the answer because the Whales Tooth parking lot in New Bedford is shared with the ferry service that goes to the island. And so they transferred me to someone else, another department or another company. And then they, in turn, transferred me to the service that accepts payment. And I stayed on hold for a very long time with them. And ultimately, they didn't have an answer for me whether overnight parking was available. They just said I had to go to the lot and find out. And I couldn't do that, so we ended up getting a ride to the station. But
so what's your
we would have
question,
loved to
Sarah?
park overnight.
What's your question?
Is there overnight parking at the Wales Tooth parking lot? And if there isn't, should the MBTA not take it off their website because it says that there is?
Sarah, thanks. We really appreciate the question.
Well, if we could have her information as well, because I can confirm knowing that. But the one thing we did last year, bring customer service back into the MBTA. We had for a long time outsourced it. We just celebrated the 1 year of those folks, and they do answer in person during the work days. So we will make sure that we get that information out to all of your listeners, because the level of service that they've been doing over the last year is dramatically more improved over what we've done when we outsourced it. And that's one of the things that we want to make sure we do is a lot of times we've been using third party, and we always have a need for that. But there are some things where one party can get the answer versus the transferring. And I know how frustrating that can be when I try to make calls to certain things and you either get hit one for, repeat the previous.
That will make you so popular you won't even believe it. I called Comcast this week and was absolutely stunned that a real person answered the phone. I will be a loyal Comcast person forever because a real person answered the phone. That would be
they came to your house twice and they didn't fix anything.
They're coming to again today. I have to leave right after the show.
That's great.
We're working on it.
We do have real people
Sarah
answering,
and Dartmouth,
and
don't hang up.
We'll
Sarah,
advertise that better.
That's a big deal, though. That's a really big deal to people, I think, to get an actual human being on the phone.
Sarah, we're going to take your contact information and give yours to the T as well. Heather and Drake, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Hi.
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 I'm calling to pay a compliment. I don't have a question.
That's fine. You can do that. What do you do?
Okay. I'm retired, and a friend and I wanted to go into Boston, but she was afraid to use the public transport system. She's from New Hampshire. She's never done it before. And I said, I did it in grad school. It'll be okay. And she was a nervous wreck. I want to tell you that we went into South Station. I had never been to South Station before. I asked for help from many, many of the employees, and every single one of them was gracious and helpful and just wonderful, wonderful. So I really want to pay a compliment to the people you have working for you, whether they were transit officers or people who had on some kind of a purple vest, or there were guys dressed in orange. No matter who I asked, everybody was wonderful.
Heather, that was a hell of a call.
Thank you for that call.
Any thoughts, Phil Lang?
Well, first and foremost, Heather, thank you very much. If you and your friend ever worry about riding the system, let me know, and I will personally ride with you as well to make sure you know it's a safe and one of the best ways to get around. We've really been focusing, going back to why we do what we do. It is public service, right? And the thing that frustrates the folks the most is the communication piece. And we just talked about it with the person before.
Yep.
We're here to make people's lives better. We're here not to make things harder on them. And to be able to get real information, be able to get that confirmation. And she mentioned TPD, their role in terms of safety and security and just making people feel comfortable using the system. This is all that we've pushed back internally, is to make sure without the public that we serve, we don't have roles and we don't have jobs. And that's why I remind every one of my employees, it's not an easy role, but when you make people's lives better, it's rewarding, and there's nothing better than that.
Here's Ellen in East Boston. The Blue Line was shut down for 9 days last week, and since reopening has been experiencing chronic delays. The Blue Line was shut down in the middle of Boston Public Schools' finals week, creating a significant hardship for BPS high schoolers. This is a burden on families. When can we expect better service, says Ellen in East Boston.
So the 9 days that we did shut down, and I know, one of the challenges when you're shutting down the Blue Line is there's not very many ways to get into and out of the city from East Boston. I rode the buses every day. I took the ferries every day to use the same alternative service as our riders. And when there's an incident in the tunnels, it really does back up the alternative buses. And even when there's not an incident during the heavy rush hours, the buses are definitely longer. The work we did was instrumental. That is going to give longer-term stability. we replaced not only just doing maintenance, but we did actually full-depth track replacement down to the base. We installed new drainage systems in the system that didn't exist. When we took away all the ties, it's just like ponding of water. We have to get the water out of the system. We're using new ties. We're using composite ties that are better in a moist environment. Now, on that Monday when we returned to service, we did run into challenges with the signals, and that's not what we expect of ourselves, and certainly not what our riders should have had on that Monday.
Whose fault is that? When that happens after you've been shut down, why didn't the signals work? Who failed?
It wasn't that it's necessarily a failure. What it was is that after the test train ran, it showed that the service was ready to go back. But then when we ran multiple trains, as you do with normal service, the signals and the communication component. So what there was a damaged impedance band, which is part of a track circuit, and that allows to send the signals in terms of train movement. So when that impedance band, which we had to identify later on, was one of the issues, along with some trip stops, that made for a very rough Monday. I can't do anything but apologize, but I want to tell the riders that we were going to do better than that. Over the last year and a half, with all of these different diversions, the return to service is always important. And that's one of the reasons why the diversions are, despite impactful, they're better, because imagine if I'm doing that every night and I'm returning to service every night to the next morning. The potential for those issues are much more challenging. Those diversions are the best way to accomplish the amount of work we need.
Before we take our one break with you, Phil Lang, there was a wonderful story, at least to me in the Globe, about, 2 weeks ago, and my apologies, I can't remember who wrote it, about these hidden tunnels under Harvard Square.
Yeah.
And there was this discussion about whether or not they could become entertainment venues, etc. And the story ended with saying that they weren't sure what the T's position was. Would they rent the space? Were they willing to be a landlord? Would they refurbish it? Would they sell it? What was your reaction? Well, I'm sure you didn't need a reaction. You probably knew about it before. What is your feeling about potentially doing something under Harvard Square in these tunnels, half of which have been vacant, at least half of them vacant for ages?
Well, I think hopefully folks know, since I've been here, I'm always open to different ideas. With regards to that tunnel, the team is working right now on some access for some of their consultants that want to take a look at
really?
it. The one thing that, just with anything, we should all go in eyes wide open, because it's not as simple as just saying, here, you can have it and open it up to the public. You have to look at safe access into and out of the tunnel. There is MBTA infrastructure that's in the area adjacent to that has to be protected, but also accessibility. Right now, the tunnel is not accessible, and it has a hatch for one area and access through. Right now, if you walk through, there's a lot of tripping and stuff. It would have to be someone who come in and take a look at how to do all of that, make it accessible. We're open to it.
Would you go to a concert underground in Harvard Square?
If they open it, sure.
Carol, would you go to a concert underground? She would too. So I think we're getting there.
Okay.
We got to take a break.
We're talking with the MBTA's Phil Lang. We're going to be right back after a quick break for all the questions that we can fit in. 877-301-8970 is the number to call or text out. We're talking to the MBTA's General Manager, Phil Lang. You're listening to BPR on 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live at youtube.com/GBH News.
Ongoing ICE raids have led to a massive slump for businesses in Latino neighborhoods of Los Angeles.
Our community is genuinely scared to leave their homes at moments, and many of the vendors here are also afraid to open shop.
We take you to a beloved Mexican market, El Mercadito, to hear how business owners there are holding up on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Insurance coverage from healthcare experts for businesses, individuals, families, and retirees. Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Learn more at mgbhp.org/everyday. And American Repertory Theater, with the hit musical rom-com Two Strangers Carry a Cake Across New York. The Boston Globe calls it clever, funny, and delightfully surprising. Now playing. amrep.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined by the MBTA's General Manager, Phil Lang, spending the whole hour with us answering your questions and ours, 877-301-8970. You want to go to Will in Auburn?
We'll go to Will in Auburn. Hi, Will.
Hello, Will.
Hi.
Hey.
How old are you?
I'm 7.
Perfect.
7.
Take it away.
That's
We're
great.
huge with 7-year-olds.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Will.
I really like it, and I'm going to take a trip all the way to the aquarium, a bunch of the lines.
Mm-hmm.
They also sent you data, so I was wondering if you also, my data, so yeah. Why doesn't the green line and any of the other lines, well, I don't have bathrooms.
Will, don't go away. Will told our call screener, Phil Lang, that he not only is a huge fan of the tea, as you could tell from what he had to say, he has sent you 2 letters. This is quite sad, by the way, to which he has not gotten a response.
Oh, no.
So what do you say to Will from Auburn there, Mr. Ang?
I will have to check through my mail, and I will personally make sure we reply to Will.
I knew you would. Will, what was your letter about? Can you tell us briefly? What'd you write Mr. Ang about?
Well, they're in packets, and they're just pictures of all the lines of the tea.
Oh, you want
Oh, okay. Okay.
He's got great swag over there at Tea Headquarters. Hey, Will, don't go away. Give your whole name or your parent's name to one of our coworkers, and I guarantee you that Mr. Ang will get back to you in short order. Thank you, Will. We really appreciate your call. Thanks.
So Phil Lang, long before you were here, so you had nothing to do with this, there was kind of a scandal over what they called the money room or the cash room at the MBTA. I think it was 2016, where it turns out that instead of having like 5 or 10 people with keys to the places they keep the money, there were 500 to 1,000 keys. There was the locks had been disabled on the vaults over there, and there was a grill pit out in the backyard where people were there in their flip-flops and their shorts making cheeseburgers and hamburgers, and there was a big trouble for the tea. But they solved that. The people got in trouble that were at the money room. But now you have a situation in Cabot Yard where a bunch of people are being federally charged with claiming that they inspected the red line when they didn't, and apparently some of them anyway are fixing, doing car cleaning and detailing and brake repairs and all this auto work, like this little auto shop repair place, but they're not on MBTA cars, they're in private vehicles. So what's the latest? What happened?
So, public, private, when these things happen, it's important that management takes immediate action. When this was first brought to my attention, we immediately started to investigate, and as soon as we identified that the activities there were not MBTA activities, each of those employees that were involved were put on disciplinary leave. Ultimately, in investigating transit police, we all felt like it was best to have the federal investigate, because they could do a much more thorough thing. The thing that we've been really preaching at the MBTA is it's not just the employees that are involved, it's the management has to oversee this, because at the end of the day, we're all accountable for this. The actions of a few, I don't want to take away from the actions of so many, because there are so many great things that the employees are doing. The amount of work that we've done over the last 2 years demonstrates that we can be a better agency, and we are going to be even better than folks are feeling right now. But at the end of the day, it's not an easy job, but it is a job, and we expect everyone to be doing what they're doing, because you let down your colleagues, you let down the public that we serve, and whatever penalties they're facing is going to be decided over time. And again, I hold myself and my leadership team just as accountable for those things, to be able to get out and about and make sure those kinds of things can't be happening and shouldn't be happening.
But part of this allegedly falsifying track inspection records, I assume you did follow up. Did they declare any track safe that was not? Did they declare any track that was defective, that was actually safe, where you had to spend money that you wouldn't have otherwise done? Did either of those circumstances
We
obtain?
did follow up. We had our teams consistently going out after that to make sure anything that they inspected was re-inspected.
And what did you find?
Well, by that point, we had already started fixing a lot of our infrastructure, but we're also finding that the work that we've done, the system was safe. Nothing at that point made me concerned about what they may or may not have been doing with regards to the tracks.
Fair enough.
I'm sorry.
You go ahead.
I was just going to say, because this is, think about this on a day like today. Maybe it's a little bit windy, but even yesterday when it's nice, a beautiful day in the summertime, taking the Charlestown to Long Wharf ferry back and forth to work. Tell people about this if they don't know about it.
The water transportation is something that when I got here was a priority, and it's really exciting. We have been quietly and slowly building up our water transportation capabilities. We implemented the Lynn Ferry, which has been robust ridership, and then we've, over the last 2 years, extended the duration of when they run. We picked up the Winthrop Ferry, and we now run that for that.
Nice.
But over the last 2 years, even though it was not required, when we found some ferries that were available, we purchased them. We purchased an extra backup ferry for heavier waters to give us a backup for Lynn. We leased a ferry to actually run the Lynn service, and then we bought 2 other ferry boats, which we just renamed with using 3rd graders and 4th graders to help us rename. One is serving Winthrop, and one is serving Quincy.
What are their names?
Harbor Gem for the Gem of the Harbor by Winthrop, and the Abigail Adams, because it's not just it's not just John Adams. It's the woman behind it and her leadership. And this came from the students. We had school contests. My head of water transportation, David Perry, came up with a great idea how to engage with future leaders, and we just christened both boats earlier this week.
That's great.
By the way, a lot better than the Brits. Remember when they renamed that boat Bodie McBoatface a couple of years ago?
It was terrible.
So can you drink on the ferry in the afternoon?
I'm sorry?
Can you drink on the ferry in the afternoon?
Yes, you can.
You can?
Yeah, well, this Charlestown ferry, it runs every 15 minutes.
Wait, I want to be clear. Alcohol.
Yes, the ferries do have a bar, at least the longer ones. My East Boston ferry does not, unfortunately.
I'm so sorry.
It's only a 10-minute trip. You'd have to drink it much quicker.
So, but 15 minutes from Charlestown to Long Wharf Ferry is pretty good. I mean, that's a pretty good time. Plus, you're out in the water. It leaves at 6:45. The last one leaves from Charlestown at 8:15. So that's really nice in the summertime, huh? I would think that would be great.
This administration, Governor Healy, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, water transportation is huge, and I'm really excited about where we could take it.
I'm sorry, 10 minutes it takes. It leaves every 15 minutes. I made a mistake, sorry.
Even Winthrop, with the new boats, we've separated that in Quincy. We've taken 30-plus minutes off the Winthrop trip. We've added weekend service that was not existing before. So these are the things where, earlier on you talked about late-night service. How do we keep expanding our service to where we're making it much more attractive to use?
Do you know Brian Shortsleeve, one of your predecessors?
I've read about him.
Oh, you don't know him personally?
No, I don't.
What's the word inside the T about what kind of job he did? He's running for governor, for those who don't know, on the Republican side. What's the word on him?
Oh, I don't talk to anyone about those things.
I knew you didn't. Okay, here is Hugh in Concord. I just want to thank Phil Lang for getting the escalator at Alewife fixed, longest escalator in the world, I think. That's me, not him. I met Phil Lang on the Red Line. He gave me his email address. Could his team see if the other exit at Alewife could be open? There's only one exit. Takes ages to get out of Alewife's parking, 30 minutes.
Well, I think I've talked about in the past, Dennis Farley, my head of stations and facilities. One of the things I hope people see is that we are committed on not only fixing our track infrastructure, but the station environment is important. Accessibility, escalators, elevators, all of those things. And little by little, we're cleaning them, they're brightening, and we're fixing all the different components that are affecting it. But elevators and escalators is another area where we're looking at how best to invest our dollars to keep them going. We're looking at the contracts that we have for maintenance and repairs, and we want to make sure that we can, again, just like everything else, how do we take the dollars we have and make sure that everyone is doing what they should be? Because it's important.
Yeah, I misspoke, by the way. When I said longest escalator, I meant Porter Square. I didn't mean Alewife. We talked to you a lot, as did everybody in town, about your project with the deadline, which you met, about the slow zones, hundreds of them. Is the signal fixing the slow zones of 2025, is that the major project for the T and U, Phil Lang?
Well, there's actually a number of major projects.
What are they?
Signal upgrades is definitely ongoing. That had been long delayed. red line, orange line signals, and we have a lot of weekend diversions right now to support it. But that's important because those are another point of delays and impacts to our riders. We're focused on getting cars still, red, orange line cars by the end of the summer. All the orange line cars will be here, brand new. We just implemented the 17th consist on orange line, so that means we're probably during the peak running every 5 minutes on orange because of the number of consists. Red line, we just implemented the 5th consist of our red line new cars. And our goal is to, as we bring in new cars, get rid of the Type 1. Green line Type 10s are in design right now. We expect those to come, the test trains next year, with revenue trains in 2020, is that 7 then?
No, it's 6.
2027, yep.
Whatever it is, okay.
And then we're focused on accessibility as well. We've done a lot of work on commuter rail stations with mini-high platforms to be able to allow assist to be used. And we're looking at other key needs. Green line train protection, there's a lot of stories about speeding on the green line, accidents that have occurred. And, if I go all the way back to 2007 when the first NTSB investigation, the contract that I inherited in 2023, that contract had been going on for almost 7 years, and really there wasn't enough progress, which is why we pivoted. Right now, Green line train protection, all the tunnels have been instrumented with the devices that will communicate with the trains. Trains are being instrumented now with onboard equipment. So it's always been about safety, but it's always been about making the trips better for our riders, and then the comfort and the appeal, because if it's not safe, it doesn't matter what we do.
What percentage pre-COVID ridership are we back to, filling?
I think overall in the system-wide, we are, every month we've been creeping up. I think we're over 60%.
60%.
We have Stan. Is Stan still here that's at the BPL? Oh, here he is.
Hi, Stan. Sorry to make you wait. We missed it.
Yep.
Hello, Stan.
Here you go.
Hello, thank you.
Sure.
And, thanks very much, Phil, for all you've done for our community. It's much appreciated. Cleveland Circle is a major transit hub, student hub, retail hub, and the level crossings there have not been serviced since I think the Pope came to town. So it's been a long wait. We'd like to invite you out to Cleveland Circle to survey the conditions with our community groups there to see what could be done to improve the conditions. Right now it's hazardous for bicycles, pedestrians, and a nightmare for cars that pass over about 10 different level crossings there. Will you join us in Cleveland Circle to take a look at those conditions?
I certainly will get out and visit and join you and take a look at those. One of the things that we always want to make sure is that it's not just about running our system, but it's also how we interact with the communities that will join us. Maybe one of the things is we should make sure that, let me look for my team first and get some information regarding work that we maybe have upcoming. But at the same time, let's take a look at the conditions that exist today. Certainly, we don't want any incidents, whether it's our own trains and riders, as well as the people that are adjacent to us.
Do you leave your contact info with our colleague Nicole? We'll pass it on to Phil and his team.
I can't be the only one who doesn't know what level crossings are. What are they?
At grade crossings where the trains are on the street. And the road, and
where the cars are going
pedestrians and bicyclists are on the same level.
I got you.
Somebody watching on YouTube says, I have a blind access card and can't tap my wife in using the new system tied to a credit card. Will that be fixed at any point?
Blind access card can't tap in using the new. Yes, the new tap and go will be taking those. That is the next part of including all those other cards.
When's that happening?
Programs.
When's that happening?
That should be later this year.
Later this year. Thanks for the question. We appreciate it. Janice in Watertown, you're on with Phil Lang. Hey, hello.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yes.
Okay, good. I wanted to, first of all, compliment you on the system called The Ride. It is a wonderful way to get around for seniors and people who are disabled. Now, I had a double bypass, and that's why I'm using it. And when a car comes for me, I'm very happy. The bus, when it comes, also gets me where I'm going, but it doesn't have very good undercarriage and it wobbles and shakes, and I am a little concerned about my health. Is there some way that the system is going to fix the undercarriage of those little buses?
I think you came to the right place, Janice.
Thank you, Janice.
Listen in.
Well, I'm really happy to hear your compliments of the ride. We've worked really hard to ensure that the ride service...
Can you explain briefly what it is? I assume a few people may not know. I mean, Janice touched on it, but tell people what it is.
Well, ride is the ability for folks that have special access needs to be able to call into the MBTA and request specific rides that allow them, in her case, whether it's a wheelchair or access, be able to be picked up and use our system. We were very worried in the beginning about the ability to compete as we had income eligible, and we would expect that the number of trips would go up. But I'm proud to say, with a lot of effort working with the vendors, the ride is actually delivering 96% on-time performance using it.
Wow.
Regarding the buses, one of the things that we've recently done, and a lot of credit to our operations team, we just hired a new head of vehicle equipment maintenance, Mike Walsh, and Mike is really focused now on how do we maintain our existing fleet. We're doing a lot of work actually in-house with regards to bus overhauls. And we're really building a stronger team to take a look at those types of things where, things that maybe we would send to a third party. How do we build up that skill set in-house and keep our fleet running? The buses serve more than 40% of our ridership today, which is important. And if I go back 2 years ago, we had dropped trips on buses over 8%.
Yeah.
And if you think about 75,000 trips a week, that's a lot of trips. Just a month ago, we're down to 0.6%. Which is a huge difference. When you're running 12,000 trips a day, 0.6 is about 70 trips a day. It's a far cry from where we were 2 years ago. Availability of equipment is important, but also comfort, to her point.
Janice, we wish you good health and a speedy recovery. Thanks for your call.
This is another neat thing you're doing, because Houghton Pond has swimming and fishing and biking and horseback riding and stuff. Tell us about the expanded summer bus pilot there.
Well, the summer bus pilot is... one of the things we're continually looking at is our bus service in the past and how we can improve bus service to different destinations. It's not just about going to work. It's about being able to take the system to go to places that perhaps you wouldn't go if you didn't have a car.
Yeah.
Right? And being able to take the bus both directions is something. And we're actually starting to work with to promote the ability to use MBTA services, not just buses, but trains, subways, paratransit, and commuter rail. Because there's so many great places to see, whether it's ponds, whether it's waterfront, whether it's plays and museums and sporting events. And I think a lot of people, as they see that we're improving service and it's more frequent,
they'll go.
Yeah.
I should have said this is in the Blue Hills Reservation in Milton, but it's a pretty place. Very pretty place.
How long you lived here? It's 2.5 years? How long have you had this job? 2.5 years?
2.5 years.
You read in the Patty Wen piece, you said you love the place. What's been the best part of coming about, other than meeting riders and in your life? What's been the best part of the move for you? You're a New Yorker.
Well, you know what? It's a vibrant town. It's a vibrant state. All of the things we just talked about, the things to go and see and do. But also, I think I love the vibrancy that I get from the students. And when they're in town, there's this energy that comes along with it. And the other part is that, we're living in the city, not in the suburbs like we used to.
You're in East Boston, right?
I'm in East Boston, right, yes.
That's great.
So it's everything I really had in New York, 4 seasons, culture, restaurants, activities. But it's such a fantastic, safe environment and clean environment. And
so other than the New York Mets, do you miss anything?
Just maybe my barbecue.
Okay. Glenn Walpole.
I think I said that last time.
You can't beat the food in New York City. You cannot
Well, I
beat
think
it.
it's pretty good food here,
Okay.
actually. Glenn and Walpole, you're on with Phil Lang, the head of the T. Hi.
Hello. Glenn's question is there any news on an east-west connection? We're thinking of going to Tanglewood, Boston.
Oh.
You want to know if you can get to Boston to Lenox or something like that. Is there any east-west public transportation connection other than, I guess, Greyhound or whatever, Peter Pan or something? Glenn, thanks for the call. Is there?
Well, I think that's where one of the things that we're focused on is not just the communities we serve, but how do we connect to the other transit agencies. That's an important piece as we're building out our capabilities. I know as the Commonwealth is looking at West-East Rail, it's not just what we have today, but where can we take this going forward? There are connections. Every connection I want to make sure is more seamless. So, for instance, one of the things we've been doing on the commuter rail is we've been sharing our schedules when we make schedule changes with the local RTAs. Mm-hmm. And they've told us that gives them the ability to actually plan their schedules to make it more consistent, more seamless, and hopefully that keeps people using mass transportation.
What is the status? I know that, correct me if I'm wrong, Richie Neal, who was obviously the chair of a key budget committee congressman from the western part of the state, was a big East-West advocate. He's now the ranking Democrat, I think, on the committee. What is the status of East-West Rail? I should know, but I don't.
Well, I know that falls under Meredith Schlesinger. We continually work on how do we improve the infrastructure for the rail I have, but also how do I support MassDOT with regards to that project. Everything that we're doing right now is going to facilitate in the future as we build up more robust track infrastructure. I talked earlier about double tracking and triple tracking where need be, because the longer you go out, I think you also need to not only have more robust local stops, you need to be able to shorten the trips with express service. So those are the things that I think as we look at longer distances, how do we actually support those? And then, going back to the point with Marjorie, as we look for expansion, I think we need to be talking with all the communities along the whole route, because if you have more service, you have more trains, you need more yards. So all of these things are, while it's a benefit, we also need folks along the corridor to know what's coming.
Denise and Quincy, we literally have a minute left, and it's yours. Take it.
I just wanted to say thank you to Phil Eng. He's doing an amazing job, and he's running such a huge organization, and yet he took the time at the beginning of the school year to address a concern we had where some middle schoolers who are taking public transportation to their school were being dropped off at a corner with no crossing guard.
Oh.
And overnight, he fixed it.
Well, Denise, we are really glad you called, and I think Phil Lang is probably pretty glad you called, too, to end this up. Anything you want to say to Denise, or did it?
I remember that situation, but I don't think I could take all the credit. My operations side of the house, DJ Habershaw, she's actually from that area as well. She went out there personally, observed all the different routes, and, because of her and the bus team, we really worked to address those things. But it's important, Denise, that, just as that you did then and others, let us know those concerns so we can actually look into them and do something about it.
Phil Lang, we really appreciate your time.
A texter wants to clone Phil Lang. He just texted and said they want to clone you.
No, we say it every time. We've been doing this 26 years. There's never been a GM of the T that's made himself available like you two, and I think it matters to a lot of people. So thank you yet again. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for coming in, Phil Lang. And thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thank you to everybody that came down to the Boston Public Library. It means a lot to us. You can keep up with us 24/7 wherever podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. On Monday, we're going to be joined by Amherst Professor Elon Stavins, the Boston Globe's business columnist Shirley Young, Princeton race and politics scholar Khalil Gibran Mohammed, and a conversation about Voc technical education in Massachusetts. I can't wait for that. With the Commonwealth Beacon's Michael Jonas and the Globe's Christopher Huffaker.
Can I thank somebody before you thank?
Yes.
We had our retreat, our annual retreat across the street the other day at the Lenox Hotel. They were all wonderful to us. Maura and Oscar in particular made the day perfect. We want to thank them and all the staff across the street.
Yes, we want to thank our staff here too. Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conlon, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer John the Claw Parker, our executive producer Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Geyer, Patrick Lally, Angelica Marrero, and Juan Jose Cadena, and our host of the Newsfeed Cafe and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. Jared Bowen and the Culture Show is coming up right after us. It's their week in review, and it starts as soon as we are done here at the Boston Public Library studio and live on 89.7 GBH. I am Marjorie Egan.
And I am Jim Browdy.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Hope you can tune in on Monday. Hope you stay tuned for the Culture Show, and have a great weekend.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Revision Energy, a solar company and a Mitsubishi Electric heating and air conditioning contractor, committed to helping customers lower their environmental impact, offering all-electric heat pump systems from Mitsubishi Electric. RevisionEnergy.com. Don't miss an intimate portrait of possibly the most iconic pop star siblings of our time. Watch Beyoncé and Solange, the Queen of Pop, and her soul sister, tonight at 9 on GBH 44.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Go back in the movie theater.
It will attack and devour.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show. Coming up today, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the movie theater.
It will attack and devour anything. It is as if God created the devil and gave him jaws.
The shark gets some serious screen time as Jaws turns 50.
You know the thing about a shark? He's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you.
It created the Hollywood blockbuster and frightened generations of moviegoers with the use of a mechanical shark and an iconic score.
The music substituted for the absent shark, which made it a hell of a lot scarier and more suspenseful.
We're going to take the Jaws at 50 deep dive.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
Then it's off to Paris, where a trip to the Louvre has become the museum version of a blood sport.
The Louvre is a tough place. It's not supposed to be fun. You don't know what you're going to face, and you just have to be ready for anything.
This week, anything includes the museum abruptly closing, locking out tens of thousands of visitors as staffers strike amid unmanageable over-tourism. And speaking of tourist season, in Venice, one upcoming visitor has sparked a grassroots uprising. Jeff Bezos and his big-budget wedding in the Italian city has incited locals.
We're not against them getting married, but we young people are struggling every day in this city where it's become impossible to find a place to live. All it took was the ultimate billionaire and everything was easy for him.
From there, after a long standoff between the White House and the National Portrait Gallery, President Trump has the final word.
You're fired.
Kim Sayet, the museum's director, has decided to step down. And we meet the cat at the center of controversy.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets.
Her name is Miss Sassy, and she's now in an art exhibition. We take on that and more right now on our Arts and Culture Week in Review.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Welcome to The Culture Show, live from the Boston Public Library. I'm Jared Bowen.
And I'm Edgar B. Herwick III.
I think we just lost our guest, Lisa Simmons, here.
Simmons.
is the artistic director,
executive
director of the Roxbury International Film Festival.
We're delighted to have you with us today, especially
Always happy.
as the Roxbury International Film Festival gets underway. But we're going to start the conversation by going over the week's top arts and culture headlines, starting with Jaws at 50, the movie that birthed the summer blockbuster, hasn't lost its bite. The movie still holds up, and its legacy is undeniable. From the oft-quoted dialogue to its iconic film score to its ability to scare generations of moviegoers with a mechanical shark named Bruce. This has been really fun. First of all, I think it's a little wild that at the time that we're talking about all the Massachusetts 250 stuff between Bunker Hill and Lexington and Concord, that we're also mixing Jaws into this from 50 years ago.
You know what's crazy though is I was watching it recently. I noticed that there's the billboard that shows a bunch of times.
Right.
There's this thing that's like the regatta that they're saying is happening on Amity is the 50th annual regatta, which means now 50 years on, that would have been 100 years ago.
Oh my
so
God,
that's kind of crazy.
There are anniversaries galore.
Yeah.
But this is such a fun moment to look at this film on a few different levels. So, of course, all film lovers are retelling the stories of Jaws, which we'll get into. Of course, it was over budget, and it went well beyond what it was supposed to in terms of shooting schedule, which ultimately resulted in the kind of film we got, i.e., if the mechanical shark wasn't working, they couldn't shoot it, which meant we see less of it, which meant that it actually made it more of a successful film in the end, because you're imagining, conjuring the unimagined, to really understanding, as Kate Dellis, Culture Show producer and reporter, reported this week, how it helped to shape Martha's Vineyard in a vastly different way beyond just the high-end vacationing enclave that a lot of people think it is today.
No, I mean, I loved this movie. You know what? I can't remember where I was when it first came out, but I think it's true. It also sort of ushered in Hollywood's blockbuster.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely credited as such.
It's absolutely credited as that.
Changed the industry.
Yeah, and I think that we're celebrating it because there were so many firsts with this movie. But also, you're absolutely right. I mean, I feared going in the water. I still do. And
do you?
And well, I do, because there's tons of sharks.
Because there's sharks there.
There's sharks there.
They're gonna eat
especially
you.
in Truro and other places. Not to say anything. It's still safe to go in the water. Please don't take that. But it's true. I mean, we're all like constantly like looking around, right? We're like paranoid. Like, is there, especially if there's seals there and everything. But I do think it really ushered in this horror, right? This horror movie that wasn't like this big mechanical shark that maybe we would have seen it and been like, oh, that's not real. But the fact, you're right, Jared, that we didn't see it with John Williams' score creating this like suspense and the fear of the unknown is what really made this movie what it was.
It's funny because I mean, I get it, and I understand that it is to a certain extent a horror movie. It's definitely a thriller, but I do not think of it that way.
It's a community. It's like
and I think that the reason why we still like this movie is that it is about more than just
fear,
the scary shark.
Yes.
In fact, I think you could make an argument that this is, if not one of the, but you could probably make a cogent argument that this is the most American film ever made. It takes place on the 4th of July.
Right.
You have all of these themes running through it, like commerce versus safety.
Like family.
Politics. Like outsiders.
Duty.
There's all of these times where you get the class system, science versus like emotion.
Right.
All of these things that we're still dealing with today, they're all in that movie. And I think that is a big part of why that movie still works and resonates as much as the amazing like thriller aspect of it, the sort of like the beauty and the artistry with which they are able to build suspense, etc.
Yeah.
So
well, I think it's also interesting, as I'm thinking about this too, how much is still unknown, because we certainly have a sense of what's underneath the surface of the water, but by and large we don't know. And earlier, I think it was just a few weeks ago, I talked to Greg Skolmel on the show, of course, the celebrated shark expert, and he admitted that there is still so much they don't know about sharks, and I think that's part of the reason that this holds up, because it taps into this primordial notion of the planet and what lurks out there that we can never completely understand, and we as the human species will never really probably be able to master. And that's why this is so terrifying, because even if you don't have sharks jumping out at you at the water at you all the time, there's still something there that we will never control, because human beings like control.
Right. No, exactly. I think you're exactly right, and it actually ushered in this total like fascination with sharks, but the deep sea, right? And we're seeing that in National Geographic. We're seeing this in all of of these, shows where there's oceanographic shows that now they're showing like in the deep, deep, deep ocean, there's this creature, and you're like, oh my God, right? So it's just like, it just builds on that.
Well, and building on that and going to some of the making of the film, this is again from Kate's reporting this week, but local carpenter Eric Ropke spent a lot of his time trying to fix the endlessly malfunctioning mechanical sharks. And so one day he and a crew member had to swim out to a shark that had stopped responding when they were filming this. They had to swim out to this control station in the middle of a shoot. Here's what he had to say about that.
We're out there for 25, 30 minutes and doing the repairs, got it all done. So we push off to start to swim back. And I'm about 2 or 3 strokes into swimming. And out of the corner of my eye, I catch the image of this shark's head. And I tell you, I was hit with this bolt of energy in my entire body that was totally uncontrollable and right down to like primal core. I mean, just totally blew my socks, I mean, it was just such a rush.
Of course, Steven Spielberg felt that way for different reasons.
Oh my gosh.
They were breathing down his neck. Of course, he didn't know what he was sitting on when he was making this. He had just made a celebrated television film, and that was it.
And he was so afraid that this was going to break him. I mean, he was 27 years old. This is crazy.
And he was definitely in over his head,
Yes.
which in retrospect he fully admits, right? But and one of the reasons is he was like, no, we're going to film this in the open waters, right? Which is everybody was like, that's absolutely nuts. Like, there's no reason
Everyone
to do
was
it.
doing it in studios, in those big tanks
But
and studios, right?
I think he was right. He was absolutely right to do it. I mean, you watch that movie, for example, there's that scene with Ben Gardner's boat, right? And that one is filmed in a tank, and you can tell.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You can tell that one
finished it
scene is in a tank, right? Everything else, the look of this film, and part of the reason why it works is the fact that he, despite all advice to the contrary, decided to go for it and film this on the open waters.
Well, and not only that, it had very few celebrities, right?
Yeah.
So there were so many people that lived on the island that were part of this movie. So that also adds to it too, that the people that were swimming in the ocean,
local
other people,
character,
the characters, right?
yeah.
The local character had that local feel. It had that sense of authenticity, and so I think that's so important. One thing that I really liked that I read about was that Murray Hamilton, who plays the sleazy mayor of Amity, he was chosen because he resembled Richard Nixon.
Oh,
yes,
that's
which is
interesting.
interesting because here we are on the heels of the ending of the Vietnam War, about
yeah.
Nixon resigning, and then here comes Jaws as this sort of like escapism movie. But there are all these choices that went into it.
Well, I think it's also, as I was thinking about him, the mayor, I was thinking this is the root of so much of conflict in television and movies, is that this is a solvable problem.
Yep.
This was so easy not to have this happen, but this is, of course, what springboards into the whole epic that it became. And, of course, it changed everything.
Yes, yes.
Well, and we should mention, by the way, that the Martha's Vineyard Museum has Jaws at 50, a deeper dive exhibition that's happening all summer long, and we didn't even get into the rancor among the cast. And so The Shark is Broken, which is a great play, is going to be playing at the Martha's Vineyard Performing Arts Center through July. It's presented by Bill Haney. They're bringing that there, which talks all about the discord on the set because they did not really like each other there.
No.
Well, I think it's fair to say that if Jaws were made today, there's no way it would be created without CGI or now AI. And industry insiders are saying AI is as prevalent in Hollywood as Botox. Everyone is using it, but hardly anyone is admitting to it. So we have been talking about artificial intelligence here on the show, and I think we have moved beyond the question of should we have it, because everybody has acknowledged that artificial intelligence is here to stay. But now, how do you use it, and what is it going to mean for the industry? And so we're learning more and more. There was just a big AI film festival that happened 3 years ago when it launched. There were only 300 submissions. This year there were 6,000 submissions. These are films that are largely entirely made with AI. But now we're learning this is going to be and is pervasive throughout the films that we'll be looking and that we already are looking at.
I know. I mean, it's not a problem, right? I mean, I think it's sort of like where does AI fall in all of this, right? I mean, this is what the big strikes were about. This is about what the writer's strike and the SAG-AFTRA strikes were about, was this, using my likeness and being able to create it and make multiple of me or whatever. And so I think it's really, they're sort of like pushing the boundaries now, right? It's sort of like it's here, we have to engage in it, it has to be a part of our practice, it's not going to go away. But how do we continue to do that and not break that sort of like line that we said that we weren't going to do, and make sure that we're still using people?
I mean, you make the point, Jared, and I think it's right. Like, it's here, right? Is it Thomas Wolfe that said you can never go home again?
Right.
Like, the movies as we knew them, they're gone.
Done.
It's done. The industry is now going to be different moving forward, so we need to engage in the debate and the figuring out what it's going to look like going forward. And I think the thing with AI, and it makes it sort of difficult to talk about, because you have to stop and there's the piece of it where it is impacting the business, right? In terms of
money,
the
and
kinds
savior,
of jobs there are and all of that. So and the savings for the studios, or whatever it is. So there's the business aspect, and then there's the art aspect. And this is like, it's coming for both of them at the same time, and you gotta kind of sort through that separately. And I think when it comes to the business thing, you hope that there will be reasonable heads as these negotiations happen, and that is figured out. On the artistic side, I think that part's a little bit trickier.
Well, I mean, it's true, because it's all, what are movies? It's all about storytelling, right? And you need that human element to tell a story. You can make an AI movie, you can have a script written by AI, but it's also, you're always going to miss that component to it.
But I'm going to challenge. I was going to challenge you on this,
you're going to challenge me on this.
This is, I mean, one of the things that struck me in what I was reading about this is it's affecting things you wouldn't even think of necessarily. Like, we always appreciate artists doing their costumes, renderings of costumes. They work with a director to come up with a look. And I was reading something in the research for this that was talking about essentially there's idea laundering happening right now, where a costume designer, for instance, or their team, they're under the gun. They can't come up with the designs in enough time, so they feed it into AI, or the studio feeds it into AI, and within seconds they have a whole roster of ideas about costume looks that have been generated, and that wipes out the artist who forever was commissioned to make those happen.
I know, but then, I mean, I'm thinking, I know that they're going to get there. I don't think AI is in that point right now where it's going to come out perfect. There still has to be some human intervention in the creation of those things. But I do think it's like you're blurring these lines, and I do know that studios are going to take whatever they can in order to save as much money as they can save. But I do think that we are still talking about human-centered storytelling, right? And I know that unfortunately it might be that people can't really tell the difference.
Yeah, but the thing is, honestly, if AI ends up being better at doing this stuff than we are, obviously we have a little bit of a crisis in our humanity about saying, like, what is the arts? Are the arts really human, etc. Like, we can go on into like a philosophical crisis over
it's
that.
Like, who controls
but the bottom
it?
line is, it's gonna if it gets that good, it's that good. I think the other thing you got to remember, and this is not unique just to the arts, it's not unique to filmmaking, but there are major issues with the AI stuff. One being the energy and the power it takes for these things to work. And I think that is something that
climate
really, and what it means for
change,
climate,
right?
Not just climate, but also like, are you going to have power to turn lights on in your house if all of this energy is being sucked up by AI,
or
by generative
model computers? Or it's the creation of those huge grids that have to fuel it.
Right. So there's,
But at the same time, we're also reading about these, and I don't mean to challenge you. Well, I do mean to challenge you because I think it's going to happen. But I want for everything you said to be true, Lisa, because of course we believe in the human hand and the human brain in all of what's happening. But it just has occurred to me over the last really only few weeks that really has sailed. When you have some studios turning over their entire John Wick franchise to an AI entity so that they can bring down the budget vastly, so that it can, so much of what they need to do for the next iteration for John Wick 75 will be created by AI, because it has all the template for all the vocabulary that came before. But what happens when, of course, that runs out? So it's so fascinating to understand how much of this is going to change everything. And on top of that, we probably won't know, to your point, because the Academy Awards just made their stipulations that filmmakers won't have to disclose the use of AI.
Yeah, the transparency thing is an issue.
That's a huge issue. But I do want to say that there was one other thing that they said in 1975. If Spielberg had a broken robot shark, in 2025, filmmakers can summon an entire ocean with a few lines of text.
Yeah.
That's the difference. That's the trajectory. We went from mechanical shark to CGI to AI.
But to your point, and as we were talking about earlier, the thing about Jaws that makes Jaws great is not how cool the shark looks.
No, because it never worked.
So, yeah.
Well, coming up, the Mona Lisa moan. That's how tourists are describing the endless wait to see the most famous painting in the world. How rampant tourism forced the Louvre to abruptly close its doors for a day this week. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
Ongoing ICE raids have led to a massive slump for businesses in Latino neighborhoods of Los Angeles.
Our community is genuinely scared to leave their homes at moments, and many of the vendors here are also afraid to open shop.
We take you to a beloved Mexican market, El Mercadito, to hear how business owners there are holding up on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the Boston Symphony Orchestra, announcing the 2025 season of Tanglewood, showcasing the beauty of incredible surroundings and world-class music. Tanglewood, where music goes for the summer. Tanglewood.org. And Moonbox Productions, presenting the 4th Annual Boston New Works Festival, celebrating new original plays by local playwrights, June 26th to the 29th at the Calderwood Pavilion and the BCA. Tickets at bostontheaterscene.com. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
I'm Arun Roth, bringing you the Joy Beat podcast. We take a break from the headlines to meet everyday people doing inspiring work in their communities. Find the Joy Beat and celebrate the good wherever you listen to your podcasts.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-hosts Edgar B. Horwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. She's the artistic and executive director of the Roxbury International Film Festival, which is now in full swing through June 27th. Check it out. We'll talk about a little bit about it at the end of the show. Lisa is also program manager at Mass Cultural Council. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes anti-tourism protests sweeping across Europe. The Louvre, which is the world's most visited museum, was forced to close for much of Monday when the staff spontaneously went on strike. They cited unmanageable overcrowding, understaffing, and the museum's increasing state of disrepair. So this is something we've been talking about in regard to the Mona Lisa. The crowds are just so intense for that one painting that they're, as we keep joking, they're moving her into the basement. They're moving her below ground. But things exploded even more this week when, as I say, the staff was looking at these conditions, and they talk a lot about how bad these conditions are. I will say I was there about a year ago, and I didn't think the experience was that horrific. I think it also helps if you start first thing in the morning.
Yeah,
when
you only have to go once. You did not go to work there every day, right?
But this is a problem, and they've already limited the number of visitors they have to 30,000 a day, which is quite a lot. But this is what's happening all across Europe, and this is what museums, in a way, you want to be happy that so many people want to go to a museum, but this isn't necessarily good either.
Well, I mean, I think for one, they have about 9 million visitors a year at the Louvre, right? Which apparently is about double what the infrastructure is kind of intended to be able to process. So you have that, and I think what happened here is, as you were saying, Jared, this particular strike, if you want to call it that, kind of came both on the heels of a wave of stuff that was happening in Europe the day before, specifically in Spain and Italy. There were a bunch of anti-tourist protests with the water guns and stuff like that. But also, I think this also comes on the heels of what we were talking about last week, which is that in France, they sort of unveiled, here's the plan for upgrades to the Louvre. And I think the staff went, it sounds like it's going to take too long and not be enough.
It's like 2031.
Yeah.
It's like Macron's like, well, we're going to do this, and we're going to make all these changes.
They're sitting there feeling like they are drowning, and then, out comes the government and says, we have a plan, and we'll get to it in about 10 years, right? So they're like, no. We need this addressed now.
I mean, I do think that this is an issue. I also went to see the Mona Lisa a couple years ago, and it wasn't horrible, but I could, but we did have to wait in line for a really long time, right? So what we don't understand is that the taxing of the people that work here and having to deal with all of those people coming in at one time and security concerns, which now are heightened in a lot of places that I think we have to take into consideration. I do think that this whole idea of sustainable tourism is a really important one, and I think that everybody's looking at this globally. I think you're right. People are looking at it because you also have to take into account the people that are living in these spaces, right? And and then there's all of a sudden it's like the World Cup is coming here. I think it's still coming here.
Yep.
It's sort of like what is that going to? How's that going to tax the city? How is that going to attack the residents or tax the residents that are here, and you have to take all of that into consideration because it's the people that are really important in this tourism space.
And I think this calls for the leadership that President Emmanuel Macron had with Notre Dame Cathedral. Remember, he got out there and said, we are going to rebuild, we are going to have this reopened in 5 years, and he did. That is practically unheard of once they got in there after the fire and recognized the scope of the work and restoration that had to be done. So I think that the workers, frankly, are probably looking at that too and saying, how is this not a more urgent situation?
Priority, right?
And it's going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, almost $1 billion. And I think that is a very low number if you're talking about overhauling the Louvre. But this is going to take, I think, maybe a different way of looking at museums and recognizing that there maybe has to be timed entry. You can't just walk up and go into the museum. This will take planning.
But I think also this is, again, seeing this in context. I mean, I stretch all the way back to here. I mean, you were just talking about the World Cup. I think about the Olympics bid that, that people kind of went, wait a minute, no. I think what you have is you now have, I think, many, many, many years, a generation plus of the same story often coming from above, which says a rising tide will lift all boats. Tourism is good for us. Like ultimately everybody wins. The restaurants get this. And that, I think, increasingly for enough people has not been what played out. And so when leaders try to play that song, people push back now.
Well, before we continue talking about this, let's move to Italy and Venice, where people are protesting the big fat geek wedding.
There you
Jeff Bezos and Laura Sanchez.
That's a great line.
Wow, I get that.
Big fat geek wedding. I get it.
Jeff Bezos and Laura Sanchez are getting married in Venice. The budget is rumored to be $10 million with more than 200 guests attending. Locals who are already frustrated with overcrowding in the city say the billionaire and his bride-to-be should bounce because they are not welcome. So this is just what you were talking about.
It's the same thing. It's like, can Venice sustain this? They don't have the infrastructure, even though they're like, but it's only two. That's what I was going to say. Isn't it underwater? Are they going to have their wedding underwater? I love though what they're saying. They're saying like, we're going to line the streets with our bodies. We're going to block the canals with lifesavers and dinghies in our boats because we're not going to let them travel down the river. So
if they can get there, because they've basically the people coming to the wedding, like Oprah and company and Orlando Bloom, but not Katy Perry. That's a story for another day.
Kim Kardashian, maybe.
But they've rented all the taxis, all the
water taxis and all the luxury hotels. So forget it if you were even going to stay there. But I think what's interesting though is that the mayor says that they didn't just pick this city willy-nilly. They didn't just say, oh, let's go to Venice and let's go do that. He says the director general of the Venice Council told the London Times that he campaigned for the wedding to be held there.
He, like the mayor of Amity, says Venice is open for business. I mean, that's exactly what's happening.
So he's like, we were in competition with other places to hold this wedding, and I raised my hand and said, we want you here. Because, he's thinking not about the people, but he's thinking about the money it's going to bring. But it will have a huge impact, I think, on Venice.
I mean,
all those people stomping, maybe it's going to keep going down.
The mayor, the tourism people, this is my point. They're singing the same old song, which they say, this is great for us. This shows that we're loved. It shows that we're wanted. And they're going to bring in a bunch of money, and everybody's going to make money. But the fact of the matter is, I think people, time and time again, that money has not flowed down to enough people. And so people start pushing back and saying, wait a minute, bringing money to who? This is making my life more difficult.
And you don't have the people to do the work, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest problems too, is that people are totally understaffed.
Well, so I thought it was interesting, and this goes to your point, Edgar, that there was one of the protesters was saying Venice is now just an asset. Well, yes, and always has been, because it has always been filled with museums. There's that great, is it Mary? I cannot remember her name all of a sudden, who wrote this book about Venice, traveling to Venice in the 1950s or 60s, I think she wrote this book. Even she was addressing at the time what the tourism scene was like there. So this has always been the case, but I think probably what's changed is how wide the economic disparity is. Edgar, I know I'm reiterating your point, but so on the one hand, yes, it's going to bring in revenue. I'm sure the restaurants are going to be happy. The taxis are certainly happy that they have this allotted income, but at the same time, you have other people who recognize that they can't necessarily stay there, and thus you have people with water guns.
And thus you have the locals who can't eat where they want to eat or go where they want to go, and they can't access their own
center cities.
Right.
But I think the other thing, the other economic story here is the fact that you also have, I mean, and in some ways you look at this as kind of a good thing, you also have the ability to travel being accessible to more and more and more people around the globe than there was 40, 50 years ago. Most people couldn't go to Venice. Right now, there are many more people around the world who can get on a plane and go to Venice. So the numbers have gone up. The other thing I think a lot of these people point out that's been different is social media and Airbnb have kind of turned these places, I know like protesters will often say, into playgrounds. Like the idea that somebody's coming there to snap a few pictures, to do X, Y, and Z, post it on their profile. They're not really engaging in the local culture. No, because
they're just being there. It's just like, I need to get that on my bucket list. I need to hit that.
And so, like, that is dehumanizing the experience for everybody, and I think that's playing into this, too.
Which makes it just like the Louvre, because they're going to have to start addressing the wear and tear on cities, just like they have started to address the wear and tear on the Acropolis, because they can't handle all of those people marching hot and sitting down where they're not supposed to and eating where they're not supposed to, in the same way they're doing with the Mayan ruins, people who are climbing what they were not supposed to. And we're just not well-behaved people, and we're going to have to be reprimanded for this and sort of put in line for this because of the increase in travel.
Well, it is, and I mean, I think that cities have to figure out how to manage their tourism. I mean, obviously, it's the bread and butter of so many. Boston, it certainly is, and in these cities, it certainly is. So it's sort of like, what is your management plan in order to make sure that you can do sustainable tourism?
They need a couple sharks in the water.
Oh, yeah. Doodle.
The truth is I never left you.
So Evita doesn't want Argentina to cry for her, but are we expected to cry for disgruntled theater goers? In the new West End production starring Rachel Ziegler, you just heard some of her performance there. People who spent as much as 250 British pounds to see Evita, about $335 in America, are upset because the show-stopping balcony scene is happening offstage. Director Jamie Lloyd has Eva Perón belting out the signature song from the exterior balcony of the London Palladium to a non-paying public. Patrons inside the theater only get to see it by way of live video. So I'm very curious to see what you both have to say about this, because I have a little bit of insight. And so I'm going to hold off and start with you, Edgar.
I love everything about this.
Yes.
I love that it's happening. I love that it's happening with this song and this show. I think it is absolutely perfect. Not only is it's great marketing. It's great for social media. And it is an artistically defensible choice. So it's not a gimmick. It makes complete sense.
So why is it artistically defensible?
Well, because it's Eva Perón
and
out
that's
there
who she
on
was.
the balcony.
This was her populist. She was a populist. So she wants to share that with the people. So, there is this balance between the unwashed masses. There are the people that have to pay a lot of money to go into the theater that other people may not be able to afford to do. So why not bring theater to the masses for that one moment? I know it's the biggest moment of the play. It's my favorite moment of the play. It's everybody's, and then to bring it out there. I think it's brilliant. And I also think it's brilliant in the way of changing the way we do theater, right? It's because there's so much competition. Right, and especially here and where it is in London, there's a lot of different plays going on and everything. So why not just pop it up a bit and like figure out what we can do so that we can get talked about so people will want to come, because people are still going even though they're getting not the real version.
And one other thing I'll say in terms of it being artistically defensible is you can make a case. I mean, sort of think about what is it that you, if you are going to a show, if you're going to the theater, what are you purchasing a ticket to do? You are purchasing a ticket for the experience and for some group of people's artistic vision to be presented to you, right? You are not buying a product the way that you might buy a pair of shoes or a purse. You don't have full ownership. You are gaining access to somebody's vision. And if this is part of his vision, so be it.
Okay, so here's where I came in on this, because I am a huge fan of Jamie Lloyd. I've seen, I think, 3 or 4 of his productions now, and you keep using the word brilliance. He is beyond. He is so brilliant. You're absolutely right. So when I saw A Doll's House with Jessica Chastain on Broadway, that last scene where Nora slams the door is so famous in that play. And his production, which was, all of his productions are completely bare bones. They're stripped down to basically the actors on the set with maybe a chair or two. And in that one, instead of slamming the door, she opened the door and went out the back of the theater into Times Square.
Oh, right.
The whole audience, myself included, just gasped because suddenly the door opens and Jessica Chastain is out in New York.
Wild.
It's Nora entering out into the world. And I just saw over Memorial Day weekend Sunset Boulevard, where the young man who is brought into the orb of Norma Desmond, the Act 2 begins with him walking down the stairs of the theater, and then just like this show, he walks outside into Times Square, and he's singing Sunset Boulevard, but he's referencing how she's proclaimed on signage in Hollywood and whatnot, and he's walking around all the signs in Times Square that were legitimately there to advertise the show.
And you in the theater are seeing it on video.
So here's where it gets interesting. So we're watching this on video because he has this towering screen, Jamie Lloyd does, for Sunset Boulevard, because this is about Norma Desmond, the faded screen star. So it makes so much sense that the screen is there. In this case, halfway through the song, he re-enters the theater, so you get to hear him sing the rest of the song inside. So this is what I'm starting to have this context, thinking, okay, well, I was in this theater, and at least I got to experience some of it. It did make me want to go back and see Sunset Boulevard and just wait outside the theater like people are now doing in London to see him sing in Times Square. But I also wonder, this is why I was asking about artistically defensible, because screens weren't necessarily huge in Eva Perón's time. And does it make sense if you're inside the theater to be watching her on a screen?
Absolutely. I mean, you're marrying the two, like technology and you know, actual performance. You know, I mean, if I was going to go see that play, I would like get up from my chair, go outside, go see Rita. I'll be right back and come back. I hope you have an aisle. I want an aisle seat because I'm going to go outside and I'm going to watch that performance.
The only person I was thinking about this, I was like, all right, so who would I feel? I would feel bad for maybe the young theater goer, right? Maybe a kid who's just getting interested in musical theater, really looking forward to hearing like this song, and then you don't get it in the theater. But beyond that, I don't know. I think the benefit outweighs the cost on
I think so too.
Me,
I absolutely.
Sure.
I think
he's so clever. So if anybody has the chance to see him inside or outside any of Jamie Lloyd's productions, and it is great that outside is free. I should eat my hat because I'm the one who talks about free all the time.
And if that's the one thing you just want to see, show up at this time.
Have at it. Well, coming up, the verdict is blowing in the wind how a ceiling fan came to be the symbol of the Karen Reed murder trial. That conversation is next on the show. Stay with us.
A New York City museum is opening an exhibit of sacred objects from a Buddhist temple. Some people say artifacts like these don't belong on display.
I respect the opinion of people who are unhappy with these objects being in museums, but I also think that, there are multiple opinions out there.
What the controversy's all about next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Bill Blumenreich presents. Stand-up comedian Gary Goldman is bringing his show Grandiloquent to the Schubert Theater at the Bach Center Saturday, October 25th. Tickets and information are available at Ticketmaster.com. And Innuendo in Natick, featuring Hunter Douglas PowerView automated shades along with fabric Roman shades and drapery panels for your home and office, measured and installed by the Innuendo team at the Innuendo showroom in Natick and Innuendo.com. And the International Institute of New England, marking Immigrant Heritage Month this June. For 100 years, INNE has been committed to supporting, protecting, and advocating for immigrants in our communities. INNE.org.
Hi, I'm Gal Zipperman-Lotan, bringing you GBH Daily, a newsletter to help you stay informed, not overwhelmed. You can subscribe today and get it in your inbox at gbh.org/daily. That's gbh.org/daily.
I'm Jared Bowen. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review. I'm joined by co-hosts Edgar B. Herwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. We're going over the latest headlines, which includes Kim Sayet, the director of the National Portrait Gallery, has resigned. We have talked about this for each of the last 3 weeks. We first talked about it because President Trump, in the middle of our show, made an announcement, or news broke at least, that the president had fired her. The next week, we talked about the fact that she was still working because she was pushing back and basically saying that no, the president didn't have the power to fire her. That's the job of the Smithsonian and its Board of Regents. So last week we talked about how the Smithsonian had met and the Board of Regents had met, and they decided yes, it was their prerogative to fire her, and they were standing by her, although they were indicating that they needed to pay more attention to their scholarship and make sure that they were nonpartisan in their programming. But this week, of her own accord, without really giving any explanation other than to say that it was not an easy decision but the right one, she stepped down.
I mean, what can you really say about this? I mean, obviously, I mean, I think like with a lot of what's happening, you know, in the intersection right now of politics and arts and culture, I would just say that, you know, I think the way things are happening, it's not the things that are happening, it's the way that they are happening, and that's the thing we need to keep looking at and being sort of cognizant of. In this case, you know, at least she's stepping down of her own accord, but you sort of wonder if the previous 3 weeks hadn't happened, would she be stepping down at all? Probably not.
But just the fact that she's stepping down and she's pressured to step down. I think that this has such huge ramifications about the independence of cultural institutions, right? And political interference in the arts and you know, in private institutions that receive federal funding. Like, what's the next step? Like censorship of you know, things that you're going to have in your museum. I mean, it deeply hurts, right? That here you have this institution that is known for being open and bringing in all cultures and all people and making sure that people don't feel that they don't belong. And then all of a sudden, you know, there's this shift, as we know. But, you know, I just think it's, you know, are American cultural institutions now a safe space?
Well, and this is what I was thinking as I heard this news is we don't know what she was contending with. We don't know what was bearing down on her on social media and other forces that we see come to play when the president has targeted somebody so publicly. And we should mention that her now stepping down follows Kevin Young, who stepped down from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So that's two major vacancy for two major Smithsonian museums. Well, we'll move on to stay in Washington because this isn't the end of arts controversies there. This week, the National Park Service authorized a permit for a sculpture titled Dictator Approved. If you're watching on our GBH News YouTube channel, we're showing you the sculpture right now, or if you're here at the library, it's on our monitor. This is on the National Mall through June 22nd, and it's a not so subtle commentary on the Trump presidency and last weekend's military parade. So this, we'll describe it for people who aren't able to watch it right now, but it says Dictator Approved. It's a platform. On top of that is the head of the Statue of Liberty, which is being crushed by a golden thumbs up fist. Around the dictator-approved pedestal, you'll find quotes from dictators around the world like Viktor Orban, who have offered, and Vladimir Putin, who have offered praise for the president. What's interesting here is that, yes, this, to nobody's awareness, suddenly was installed on the National Mall, but it had the full permitting process of the national parks.
I mean, I think that this is so interesting because it is such a contradiction from the last story, right? I mean, here they're saying, oh, no, it's free speech. Like anyway, the White House doesn't like it, but it's okay. It can go there because people, we can't step on people's free speech, and so I mean it is interesting though. I mean, the National Park Service was able to do it because it's a temporary structure, right? And they did it under I think it's under the Commemorative Works Act and under the First Amendment activity. Like that's how they sort of like got it in there. It was brilliant.
It's still sort of wild to me that
it's wild
was
that
approved.
it's sitting there. It's only there till June 22nd.
Yep.
I think that's
right. Two more days.
Two more days. But for me, it's just sort of like you're going to allow this, but you're not going to allow the freedom of expression in these museums that are, supporting like diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, you do have to wonder. I mean, somebody in the National Park Service approved it, right? Like the permit went in; it was very clear
and
what
like,
this structure was going to be. Somebody said yes, but you do have to wonder whether this got flagged up the whole flagpole or not, or whether somebody just kind of said yes and wasn't paying attention, or they have an AI script running that is just doing the permit approval or whatever. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, I think it's cool that they went through the process for this. I like this more because it was like through the actual process.
Well, in continuing that process, Abigail Jackson, a White House spokeswoman, wrote in an emailed statement, I think this was to the Post.
Yeah, it was Washington Post.
In the United States of America, you have the freedom to display your so-called quote-unquote art, no matter how ugly it is. But this goes to Lisa's point, because part of the reason that the president wanted to fire Kim Sayed is because he said that she was too woke, basically, that she was pushing forward too many DEI initiatives, and they were in particular citing language that was applied under her directorship to some of the portraits in the National Portrait Gallery, which were to some extent calling out facts like the president was impeached and things of that nature. So this is a dichotomy.
Which everyone in museums are doing. They started to tell the other stories, the different stories, the deeper stories, and so all museums started doing that a number of years ago. I mean, I think it's really interesting that the White House also said that the sculpture proves that America isn't a dictatorship.
Right.
So, which is a controlling the narrative.
I will also say this: if you actually stop and think about this, while I'm on the one hand, you look at that from Abigail Jackson at the White House, and you're like, okay, well, at least they recognized it. But ask yourself, like the fact that at least I have expressed surprise that this got through the permitting process. Washington Post did a story. They're talking to people who were walking by. They're all surprised it was quote unquote allowed to be put up there. The fact that that is our reaction is problematic. This should be, of course, this is America. Of course a statue like this went up. That should be the reaction.
Also,
I'm hoping that...
I was just going to say, you might be listening and wondering why we haven't talked about the artist's name. And to go back to what we were just talking about, the artists have not identified themselves, probably for the reasons that we were just talking about, because of the way people are targeted in this country when you're exercising free speech.
Absolutely. And I hope that there's another one that comes up that gets approved in this temporary displays permit, and then another one, and another one.
Yeah. And this does follow the pile of poop that was put up.
Yeah, they think it's the same people.
Oh, it's probably the same.
And it was the Post doing a story, so of course they tried to get the artist or somebody to meet them in a parking lot, but they wouldn't go for it.
No. Clever. Now on to a fan favorite. It has been described as oddly mesmerizing, and David Lynch coded the ceiling fan in the Norfolk Superior Court courtroom where the Karen Reed trial unfolded became the visual equivalent of on-hold music for trial fan addicts. We have a picture of it if you're at the library again, or on our GBH News YouTube channel. You can see the fan, which many people were watching for many, many weeks recently. And with Laura Palmer's theme from Twin Peaks as our soundtrack, you can appreciate the peculiar Lynchian aesthetic. People were mesmerized by this, and I love the fact that one image could speak volume. This is one photograph speaks 1,000 words. In this case, it was video. So this was when the pool camera within the courtroom couldn't be shooting anything that was happening in the courtroom. They typically show the state flag or state seal or a clock, so people know that the time is running and it's not frozen. In this case, the camera person just panned up or tilted up, I should say. You pan left or right, you tilt up or down.
Little deep knowledge right there.
Right.
That's someone in the industry.
And so we watch this fan, and people are reading all sorts of Lynchian things into it.
Of course, it is very Lynchian. I mean, that was like one of my favorite series, the Twin Peaks series. But it is very true. It's sort of like this, it's suspense. It's like Jaws, It's sort of like you're waiting and then, and you're mesmerized, and it's going around and going around, and you're just waiting for it to stop because you know that the trial is going to come back. I think it's brilliant. And the thing is that the camera person had no idea. It was just like, let me find an image where
they just needed
I just need to put it up there. Okay, now it's good. Now people are going to know when we go back to trial. And he had no idea that this was going to be like a big thing.
It's a reminder that there is something like deeply artistic about the notion of rhythm, right? The idea that you're gonna go back to this thing again and again makes you start to intuit some kind of rhythm, and there is something about that like just awakens the creative impulses, or it's a very visceral thing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that's what David Lynch is doing when he repeats those same things over and over again. It's like this sense of rhythm that is undeniable.
Right, and using everyday objects to sort of like say something else, right? And that's exactly what this fan was doing.
So I'm thinking what they need to do is, out at Columbia Point, near the JFK Library, now the Kennedy Library, the Ted Kennedy Center, there is the Commonwealth State Archives.
Right.
And I think at this point, they need to do some Smithsonian action and pull that fan down, and that needs to go into our state archives.
Well, this trial, right, sort of takes its place with the Salem witch trials and Sacco and Vanzetti and Lizzie Borden, and now this. These trials of the century that have happened here in Massachusetts.
I know.
Well, speaking of enduring images, the cat who is at the center of the Ohio pet eating controversy is featured in an art exhibition. Her name is Miss Sassy, and artist Taryn Simon has included a photograph of the famous feline in her Paris exhibition titled The Game. Once again, we're putting this on our GBH News YouTube channel and here at the library. So this is the actual cat. And by the way, so the background, of course, we know that there was this complete myth perpetuated by the Trump campaign and later administration that people in Springfield, Ohio, immigrants, were eating the pets of
dangerous.
people.
Eating the cats,
because
eating the dogs.
There was a woman who claimed that her Haitian immigrant neighbors had abducted her cat. They didn't even say eaten, but they had abducted.
It was in the basement.
But the cat was in the basement the entire time, and this photographer created an image. This is what we're seeing right now is not the image of the cat. She took a photograph that's in this exhibition, but this is the power of an image because it's this artist's intent to go behind the story, essentially.
Right. I mean, I think I would love to see this exhibit because this exhibit also...
This looks amazing.
Amazing. This exhibit also has Jasmine Crockett's eyelashes, which was all part of the Marjorie Taylor Greene fight that they had, and she's like, you can't even see through your eyelashes. And then she said, well, you look, your bleach blonde hair. I mean, and it was all a political, it was this like political discourse, but using an image and using something to sort of like, make those statements. And I think it is so important, this whole misinformation that just gets out there, and it's just the lie. It's just like the Hillary Clinton thing with the kids in the basement and the pizza shop, and people are getting riled about it, and people are at risk of death
because so many
people believe it.
Yeah, I mean, this artist Brown and Risdi, educated artist, and apparently married to Gwyneth Paltrow's brother.
Oh.
Which
is
random, kind of interesting, but this sort of this exhibition, it's the images like you said, but it's also like McDonald's French fries and balloons and a Fox News microphone. She traveled around the U.S. during the campaign, during the election,
2024,
and like the whole idea here is, I think it strikes me, one of the whole ideas here is this notion that all of this stuff, these realities, these like truths that emerge or don't emerge or not truth, everything is it's built on just everyday objects, right? The substance from which all of these stories are constructed are just simple objects that often don't have any idea. They don't have any agency or idea that they are part of the story, right?
Just
this
like
cat
this cat
doesn't know. This cat's just living its life. And actually, to take a moment, this is why I would love to see this, take a moment in a gallery and look at those and see them all together and sort of sit with that idea, I think sounds very effective.
And you have to go to France to do it.
You have to
go to Paris. So while the Louvre has all those lines,
everybody's at the Louvre.
Go see her show.
Freeze in there,
I mean, I think it's pretty incredible.
Well, this means it's time for our lightning round. These are the headlines that struck us this week. Lisa, what's yours?
Oh, funny. Okay, so could the semicolon die out? Recent analysis finds a decline in its usage in British literature and confusion among UK students. The semicolon. So, okay, now that the Karen Reid trial is over, I think that this is going to be the next big thing. that people don't like the semicolon.
Anti-semicolon.
They're anti-semicolon. And, you know, I have to say, it gives me a little... I get nervous about the semicolon because it brings back trauma from my grammar school years. Like, do I use a semicolon? Do I use a colon? Do I use a period? Like, you know, like
what about
those
a
tests
dash?
that you had to take. What about a what?
What about a dash?
Or an and. So you can do it with a comma and an and. So anyway, the deal is that it was first reported. I love this, that this guy in 1490 is the one who's saying his praises about.
Okay, I can't continue. I can't continue this.
Okay,
Jared, what's yours?
Jared
what's your
loves
lightning
the
round?
semicolon.
No.
What's yours?
Jared, what's yours?
Or just tell me what yours. Just tell me your headline. Maybe
it's going to be about the semicolon.
What's my lightning round? Oh, it's about the semicolon. Look at this.
Because I started this whole thing about the semicolon.
So
Jared,
okay.
the semicolon.
So you're anti? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I mean, I don't say I'm anti. That's a
I
very
heard
strong word. Okay. Anyway, Jared.
I heard anti. I love the semicolon. In fact, when Edgar and I were preparing for the show earlier today, I realized I looked down. I always write my notes on the research, and I realized, without even realizing it, I had put in all these semicolons as I was writing my notes.
Did you put them in correctly?
What a semicolon
Did you put them in
is for.
correctly?
It's to interrupt ideas without breaking them. It's just a little balance that we create. It creates a nice harmony, which is why
it's called fancy grammar.
Abraham Lincoln and John Updike and Salman Rushdie and Jane Austen. We all love the semicolon.
Elite,
even
educated.
Mark Twain, who is famous for his very accessible language, was a semicolon guy. All right, so listen,
you're the tiebreaker.
No, I'm not the tie. So this is what I'm going to come in here with. I'm going to come in here with, as you pointed out, there's a lot of people who are great who love the semicolon, but also there are people who are very against it, including Kurt Vonnegut, Hemingway, Stephen King, George Orwell.
Yes,
Stephen King is not. That's a misnomer.
That's not true. Okay, good fact check.
Well,
I'm going to tie it in with the rest of our show. One, as you said, the semicolon was invented in 1494 in Venice. So there's Venice. And then I thought about it, and if I think about Jaws, I'll say this. I think Hooper would absolutely use semicolons. I think Quint would for sure not. And I think Brody, I feel he's a bit like he knows that it's a sometimes punctuation mark.
And what about the mayor?
Oh, see, now I didn't even think about the mayor.
The mayor doesn't even have a dictionary.
Right, exactly.
So when you were writing that out, did you put a semicolon in between each of those thoughts? Because if you're writing that out, that's probably what you would do.
Or you would say comma, and, or period, and then...
I love it. And whenever I get an email that has semicolons in it, I think, oh, well, look at you.
See, but that's what I mean. That's why it's good.
Well, that was Vonnegut's thing. He says it only shows you went to college. But I disagree with that. I think it sort of depends on...
But I also think, all right, so like just getting back to the British, the reason why this all happened is because the students aren't learning it anymore, right? That they're not teaching grammar the way it was beaten into our heads when we were kids. So they don't even know how to use the semicolon. And I think that's the problem, is that people get nervous and they use the semicolon and it's like, no, that's not the way you use it.
You know what I say to those kids?
Mark on the
there are way more, watch Adolescents, because there are way more things to be anxious about right now.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. But also, I mean, look, grammar it's a little bit like the AI thing, right? Like grammar is always changing. It's always in flux.
Right.
And the simple fact of the matter is, I think, like the semicolon, I think could be taught. I think it could be learned, and so long as it has utility, it will remain a part of our lives.
I think we should have a fourth lightning round component, and that's our audience here at the Boston Public Library.
Yeah.
If you love the semicolon, raise your hand.
Wait, do it by applause. Let's hear it. Let's hear it
by hand and applause. If you agree with Lisa's stupid sentiment that the semicolon should go away, raise your hand and applause.
Oh my gosh, I am hurt.
Wait a minute. We're in a library. This is
that's right. That's so not fair. We are in a library. Of course, everybody wants to use the semicolon. All right, I'm going to do an experiment for next time and see how many semicolons AI uses when they create.
Oh,
that's
a
a
good
good question.
All right,
See
let me
what
make
AI
this
is.
up to you. Let me give you a couple seconds to tell us what's happening with the Roxbury International Film
right,
Festival, of which
so-
you and your sister Allison preside.
Yes.
It's just kicking off. What
It
can
kicked
people
off
expect?
last night with an opening at the Museum of Fine Arts. It was fantastic with Catherine Gund and her new film, Paint Me a Road Out of Here. It goes for 7 more days. We end on the 27th. We have about 100 films. We're at the Museum of Fine Arts again tonight with a bunch of different films, lots of local filmmakers, lots of incredible conversations, lots of things to do after the film screening. So, yeah, Roxbury International Film Festival is in full swing, and you can find out more at roxfilmfest.com.
It is not lost on Edgar and me how busy and tired you probably
Yes.
are right now, and so we really appreciate you being here with us today.
I wouldn't
Thank
have it
you
any other way.
so
For sure.
much, semicolon. We really appreciate it. That's all for this edition of The Culture Show. You can tune in Monday. We're going to double down on summer with a double scoop of JP Licks. Its founder and owner joins us to talk about running the beloved institution for more than 40 years. We'll also get a preview of Moonbox Productions' Theater Festival of New Works. Edgar, what's coming up on the Curiosity Desk?
Tune in Monday on GBH2, 7:30 p.m. We've got the debut of a half-hour version of the Curiosity Desk where we're going to look into whether or not you can still smell the molasses on a hot summer day in the North End from the molasses flood. Yeah.
Thanks today to engineer Bill Piacitelli, the BPL technical and logistics crew, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, Pat Lelly, and Olivia Corshio. Also thanks to the Lennox Hotel, the Newsfeed Cafe, and to everyone who came down to the library today. We love seeing you. Thanks for voting, and just thanks for voting.
No. There will never be another vote.
I'm Jared Bowen. Hop in the water, don't be afraid, and have an art-filled weekend.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Where's Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library!
Spend your afternoon with us. Stay with us for GBH's All Things Considered at 4 and Marketplace at 6:30. But first, the world. A global view of today's headlines from the World Newsroom.
Listener support. And there's strength in those numbers, because when more people give to WCRB, the future of classical music on the radio becomes more secure. 888-995-9272 or give online at classical.org.
And now is the time to support WCRB at $10 a month, because we're going to send you something really cool today. It is the wireless earbuds, the earbuds that do it all. They have the CRB logo right there. You can show off your proud support of WCRB. They are Bluetooth compatible, they're water resistant, and they even come with the smart touch controls. How cool is that? Plus, you get those 4 hours of playtime from one single charge. All you got to do is call 888-995-9272 or go online to classical.org.
Support for WCRB comes from you. And Comcast, offering Xfinity, with internet and mobile plans to help stay connected at home and on the go. Restrictions apply. Xfinity Internet requires Xfinity Mobile. Actual speeds vary. Tonight on GBH2, pioneering singer-songwriter Janice Ian was just 15 years old when she found herself in the limelight, forced to overcome industry misogyny, homophobia, and even